Okay, everyone. Good evening. Someone complained that the sound was not loud enough in the last year. Try to keep the mic a little closer. Let's see if this will fix the problem. Okay. Welcome to the Thursday night class. This week is Parshas Vayechi. And we're going to learn the discourse in Parshas Vayechi. We're going to learn from a book called Sefer Biurei Hazohar, which we learned last week and other weeks. And this is on page 142, Parshas Vayechi. It's the first discourse in Parshas Vayechi last year. We learned the second discourse in Parshas Vayechi, a fascinating discussion about the threshing field, the whole amazing stuff. This class, by the way, the next 20, I'm going to say it now, I might forget at another class, but the next 20 Thursday night classes is dedicated by the Berlin family. This is in L'schus Esther Bas Sarah. Esther Bas Sarah, am I right? Miriam Bas Sarah, Esther Bas Sarah. I think it's Esther Bas Sarah. Should be for all good. Only good. All the brachas and all the light and all the good stuff should come in abundance. Okay. So let me give you a little background over here. An hour ago, I was at the epitome of exhaustion. I had given up and said, there's no way I'm going to teach tonight because I just don't have an ounce of strength. And I didn't think I would make it. So I thought I'm going to play the same situation that I did last week. Last week we couldn't learn Thursday night because it was the night that we don't study Torah, the night going to the 25th. So what I did was I woke up at 5 in the morning and gave the class at 6 a.m. on Friday morning. So I was going to kind of do the same thing tonight and say, you know what, I'll just give the class at 6 a.m. But then I had a strong conviction that since the class is always Thursday night, we should keep it to Thursday as much as possible. And also, since there's going to be a lot of fireworks coming from Klippa tonight, let's counter it with some fireworks of holiness. And this is fireworks of holiness. So let's do this. It's a pretty long discourse, and we're definitely, I'm not sure how far I'll get tonight. Definitely, as mentioned before, I was very tired. I got like a little second wind now, so I hope I can have some endurance. We're going to learn, and I think it's going to take us, be nice if we can finish it in 2 weeks, but definitely not more than 3 weeks. It's the Mittler Rebbe's writing, and he writes a little bit more elaborate, so you can read it a little faster. I didn't learn this discourse yet, so I can't tell you what it's about. I only got to read the first 2-3 pages. From there I got a sense it's going to be about the various different qualities of the tribes, primarily differentiating between Yosef and the rest of the tribes. But in the midst of doing this, we see that Yaakov pays a lot of attention, particularly to Joseph, to Yosef. So he's on a whole different category. But before that, he goes into the whole idea of the blessings of Yaakov, how he blesses all the tribes, that they're all blessed by being compared to the animals. Various different animals, beasts. What's the connection of the tribes to the beast? What's the quality in that? And how does Yosef stand out? It's also going to describe in a phenomenal way, which I didn't get to, but I see later, why Yaakov's passion for Rachel, for Rachel. Why was he so obsessed with her? More than Leah. What does she possess? What's her quality? All that will be discussed. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot of awesome things in this discourse. So, here we go. Shva Esrei Shana. So it says Vayechi Yaakov, that Yaakov lived 17 years in Mitzrayim. Vayechi Yaakov. Yaakov lived 17 years in Mitzrayim. So he first quotes a passage of the Zohar in which he's going to give commentary to. So here's the Zohar. My time Yud Zayin Shana. Why was it that God gave Yaakov this period of time of 17 years in Egypt? Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says, Kol Yom Yaakov b'tzara heaven. All the days of Yaakov, he was in a lot of pain, a lot of anguish. In general, I think it means, I didn't look in the Zohar, in the original, and it says over here, Chulu, could be he's skipping a little bit. But I think it means generally, Yaakov didn't have an easy life. Yaakov had a lot of hardship. Throughout his life was fraught with non-stop challenges, enough to break a person, crush a person. And notwithstanding all the challenges, he was, he had to run away from his brother, wanted to kill him. Then he was deceived, and the love of his life was exchanged for someone else. And then when he finally married, then he was tricked and dealt with his father-in-law and uncle Lavan, who made his life miserable and cheated him in every possible way, and must have not been the best son-in-law, father-in-law. We don't know about the mother-in-law, but it wasn't that easy. It wasn't easy at all. It was a 20-year period of where Yaakov has a very high level of tolerance, and yet he's complaining at the end. He lets Lavan hear it about what kind of misery he's been through at his house. So we can understand what's difficult. And finally, he's go back home. He's afraid of a massacre, that this army is coming to wipe out his family 2 times. First, Lavan was coming after him, and then Esav was coming against him with 400 men. Before he had that, he had to wrestle with an angel, an all-night wrestling match with an angel. That must have left him with a lot of trauma. Then the next day is the encounter with Esav. Thank God, miraculously, he comes out unscathed. Then his daughter is taken and abducted and raped. One daughter. Then his 2 sons go ahead and massacre the entire village because of that. And according to many Midrash, Yaakov had to be afraid that the neighboring tribes will all come to war against him, like it says in the Torah that he was terrified of that. According to Midrashic things, there were actually some wars going on, and Yaakov had to fend them off. All this is very, very difficult. And then to add the final blow, his love of his life, which was Rachel, which passed away very young, and that caused him tremendous anguish. So now that's the pain that it's talking about over here. But it says that notwithstanding all the pain, Joseph gave him comfort. Kad Yaakov mistakel be Yosef. When Yaakov would look at Yosef, havishtalam benafshei ki'ilo. Havishtalam benafshei. He felt a certain completeness in his soul. Yaakov felt at peace and complete. Why? Ki'ilu chama le'imei de Yosef. When he would look at Yosef, he saw his mother. Yosef was the son of Rachel, of Rachel. So when he looked at Yosef, in Yosef he saw his mother. The Shapiro de Yosef, dami le Shapiro de Rachel. Because the beauty of Yosef was similar to the beauty, the complexion of Yosef, the appearance of Yosef was similar to his mother. And therefore Yaakov felt regarding himself, as if he never had pain all of his life. In other words, by him having Yosef, he was in such a state of happiness and tranquility that kind of erased all the scars and wounds and turmoil of all of his life. It was so worth it for this amazing son, Yosef. And again, the Zohar is saying that's because when he looked at Yosef, he saw his mom. V'kad Yosef isparish minei. But then came the blow of all blows, when Yosef was viciously ripped away from him. So then it was fulfilled what it says in the pasuk. Joab says, "I don't have any peace." It caused such a deep, hole, such a emptiness, such a horrific gaping hole in Yaakov's entire existence, in his soul, that it was beyond any comfort, as the Torah says. The Vayechi and roges, which means anger, and like the year we're in right now, it's called Af. The Dakashulali Yaakov, because of this event of him losing Yosef, the Zohar says, was more difficult to Jacob, to Yaakov, Mekol Mada Avar, from everything that he had, come over him in his life. Ubezimne disparish Yosef Minei. Now, at the time when Yosef left him, Maiksiv, what does it say? Yosef ben Shva Shana. At that time, Yosef was 17 years old. When he went out to pasture with the sheep, with his brothers, and that's when Yaakov sent him on that fateful mission, on that very, very, where Yosef left and didn't come back again. He was 17 years old. That means that Yaakov enjoyed a very tranquil, meaningful existence for 17 years. And therefore, they have a bachi, kol yoima, and every day Yaakov would weep. Le'inin Shva Esrei Shana, for those 17 years. Yaakov wept for the 17 years that he missed so dearly, that he missed so intensely. Those were the good days of his life, and he so wanted them, and now he doesn't have them. The Shva Shana de Yosef, my ka'asivolai. So what did God answer him? How did God pay him back? Hashem says, V'Yosef yashes yadayin. Now that when he was reunited with him, God told him, go down to Egypt, don't be afraid. Yosef is going to put his hand over you. And basically God is saying, I'm gifting you another 17 years to make up for the 17 years, the good times that you missed so much. Here's a repeat, another 17 years. It's interesting if the question is asked. I mean, the 17 years is not what he is agonizing over. He's agonizing over the 20 years that he didn't know where Yosef was. The 17 years were good years. If anything, God should give him 20 years to make up for the 20 years of pain that came when he didn't have Yosef. That's a question that's asked already and discussed, but now maybe it will be explained in this mimer too. As I told you, I don't know what it's going to be in the end. But here God says to him that you've been aching so much for these 17 years. Here you got those 17 years. Shanan achronin, I'll give you other 17 years. Ba'anugin, and these 17 years are going to be with deep pleasure. V'safnukin, and delight. V'hanos, and benefit, or ikasufim, and longing. In other words, and not a longing of missing something, but a longing of like deep what do you call it? A deep inner satisfaction, to the point that you're like dissolving in that satisfaction. And that's why it says that Yaakov lived. He came alive. Shva Esrei Shana, for 17 years. 17 years. Tana, we learn, Kol inin shnin, that during those 17 years, Shchinas Yakara the Kuchebirichu Ime. The Shekhinah, the dwelling of the holy Shekhinah, the precious Shekhinah, was with him, dwelled in his soul. Ishtakach, Ime Ishtakach, was to be found with him. Begin Kach, therefore, Chaya Mikrin, he was called alive, because of the divine presence that was with him in these 17 years of deep delight and satisfaction. And that's why it says, maybe it's Tachazi, I'm not sure, it says, Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Aviyah. The spirit of Yaakov, their father, came alive. And that means also that the Shekhinah returned to him. That's the passage of the Zohar. Now the Alter Rebbe asks, this mimer seems to be very wondrous. This statement of the Zohar, with this that he's connecting Yaakov coming alive, what was so great was now he saw the beauty of Rachel, of Rachel. He saw it in the beauty of Yosef. As what he missed so much was his beloved wife, but the Zohar is putting it on, what did he miss about her? The Zohar says he missed her exquisite beauty. And for that, he was miserable when she passed away. But when she had Yosef, he was comforted with the beauty which he saw in Yosef of the beauty of Rachel, of Rachel. So the Alter Rebbe asks, is completely not understood. Yaakov was an extremely, extremely elevated, the highest level of godly person, a spiritual person of the highest levels. So physical beauty is important. It's nice. It complements a person. It adds to a person. But to be so obsessed with it to the point that you can't live, and now that you have a son that looks like her and you can see her physical facial features, and that's what is so satisfactory to him, to the point that's like the maker, or the deciding factor in his life, if he has a meaning to live or not, is if he has this person with this physical, handsome, and reflecting his mother's beauty. Something is wrong over here. He says, "Lo yitachan davar kazeh afil al pachas ha'erech." You don't find that even on someone of a lower stature, a person of a lower caliber. Shekol kach nefla be'einov avas shapira derachel, that his love and his obsession with the beauty of Rachel, of Rachel, when he sees kind of a painting of her, when he sees some kind of a reflection of her in his son, that fills him with the greatest pleasure and delight. B'toyar v'tzuras Yosef, in the complexion and in the form of Yosef. That it was like his mother. And that's it. Doesn't seem right for our patriarch Yaakov. We have to say, therefore, there's something very deep in this deep attraction, and what we say, that Yaakov was obsessed with Rachel's beauty, that he found comfort in Yosef. What he's saying, it must be something godly, not a mere physical attraction. So he's going to explain it over here. But first, we're going to preface by first asking the question, by first prefacing, we need to understand what's the difference between the tribes, the other tribes, and Yosef. For behold, we see that the primary tribes, meaning most of the tribes, are called with the names of animals and beasts in the blessing of Yaakov, their father. This week's parasha. Kamo Yehuda, like we see about Yehuda, that he's referred to, he's compared to a young lion, Gur Aryeh, a young lion. Chen Binyamin Ze'ev Yitrof is compared to a wolf, that is a devouring wolf. Yisachar, and Yisachar is compared Chamoyer Garim, a broad-boned donkey. Naphtali is compared to a Yola Shlucha, a gazelle that can run and go off on distant. V'gam bebirchas Moshe. Now we find that when Moshe, we find here there's Yaakov's blessings. There's two times we find that the tribes of Israel were blessed individually. When Yaakov blessed them, and then later Moshe Rabbeinu, before his passing, V'zayis HaBracha, also blesses the Jewish people. V'gam bebirchas Moshe, and also in the blessings of Moshe, Koire, he calls Ledun. Dun is referred to as Gur Aryeh, also a young lion, different. Yaakov compares Yehuda to a lion. Moshe compares Dun to a lion. Well, the God Amar Kilavi, and God he refers to as a young lion. Or isn't Gur Aryeh also young lion? I'm not exactly sure. V'taraf zroya, yeah. So there it speaks, and he will chop off the arm, and when he goes to war, he will have this incredible warrior strength like a lion. Ubi Yosef, by Yosef, it says, back to Yaakov's blessing, however, Ben Poires Yosef is a son of charm. And I think what he is emphasizing over here is that, again, it would seem like from the Mimer that what he wants to say is that in Yosef, we don't find that he's comparing him to an animal. Maybe in the fact that he calls him Ben Poires, a son of charm, giving him more of a human image. Now, it's hard to say that, because if he's including over here Moshe's blessings as well, Moshe does compare the tribe of Yosef, the tribe of Ephraim, the descendants of Yosef, to an ox. It's got the karnei re'aim, and to a re'aim, and to a shur, which is also animal. So I'm not sure if what he means over here is to differentiate that the other ones are compared to animals and Yosef is not. That's what it seems like. I would have to look it up in another version of the Maimer, of the Tzemach Tzedek. Perhaps he would add clarity. On the bottom I looked, I couldn't find. Because this Maimer is brought in a few different places, and sometimes in the different sources you have a little bit of an explanation. So we're going to leave that as something that I still want to check up. As I mentioned, I didn't get a chance to go through this the way I should have. Okay. Add until the final blessing over here, Tiana l'Rosh Yosef. All these blessings should come to the head of Yosef, and to the top of the head, Nazir Echov, the one that was separated from his brothers. Okay. In general, his question over here is to understand the relationship of the tribes to animals. The Inyan, and the idea is, Kihine Onoroyim. For behold, we see. So he's going to go and explain an interesting differentiation that we find between domestic animals and wild beasts. In Hebrew, what we refer to as behemois and chayos. That there's a very major difference between the two, between behemois and chayos. Beasts and domestic animals. Domestic animals we refer to as an ox, a horse, even a donkey, sheep, goats, all these type of stuff, farm animals, versus wild beasts. And what's the difference? We see that a lion has a nature, predatory nature, and that it rips apart kol behema, every animal that it sees. And a wolf is also a wild beast that, as we're going to see in a moment, they have a thrill in a hunt. They have a thrill in capturing another animal and ripping it, killing it. If they're hungry, of course. Sometimes even when they're not hungry. There is like it is something provocative when they see one of the animals that belong to that whole category that possibly is food. Sometimes they kill not out of necessity, but just because it provokes in them. And they go after with such a ferociousness, with such an intensity. And the lion is more ferocious than all of them, more of a killer than all the other ones. Ki yitroif v'yidrois, because it will yitrof means it will tear, v'yidros, and it will rip apart. Rak laharoig esanidras, only to kill. It gets a certain thrill in this murderous act, only to kill the animal that's being killed. V'loy lachila, even if it's not for eating. Specify the animal and the wolf, but there's also animals. Because even a fox will go after much smaller animals, but we'll go after them and then kill them. Tairif, as it is known. And this is a great wonder. It's something to be wondered about in the nature of the creation. Because in the essential nature of the world, when you look at the various different animals that there are, this is a four-legged animal. This is a four-legged animal. It says, Ein hefresh kol kach. There's not such a big difference. Bein chaya lebehem. It's not like this is an enormous being and this is small. You have a horse, it's a big animal. You have an ox, it's a huge animal. You have a cow, these are very big animals. Yet they're kind of slow motion. They're tame in compare. Yeah, I know there are the bulls and the bullfighting and all of that, but that takes kind of work to get them riled up. It's not like the instinctive nature of a bull to charge at every creature that's in its, 50, in its 200 feet radius. A lion, unless he's very tired or very busy with something else, sees an animal and he's right away, his or her ears perk up and they're ready to charge and to kill for it. So even though, in terms of size and maybe even in strength, a buffalo is a very powerful beast. Even a horse is a powerful beast. Strong animals, got a lot of muscle power. But they just don't have that fire in them to attack and to go after with that zest and zeal. And that's what basically differentiates between what we call in Hebrew chaya, a beast, and what you call a behemoth, domestic animal. That's why they're domestic. We can have them around people. Even though you got to be careful around them too. There's all the laws pertaining to an ox that gores in Torah. So we're well aware of that possibility. But yet, it's not a prohibition for a Jew to own an ox. People have farms and they all had oxen. Not a problem. But you're not allowed to have a lion. You're not allowed to have a wild beast. Even if you're saying you're going to watch them. Why? Because we're afraid that, what can happen? Unless you own the zoo and you have the proper whatever. But generally, not allowed to do that. Because you're putting people in danger. So we differentiate between these two types of beasts. So aim hefresh kol kach ben chaya lebehema, between a beast and an animal. V'lo manishtana tivam kol kach. Why is their nature so different? B'davar zeh, in this manner. Shebeteva hachayus, in the nature of beasts, is hakas, is rage, v'aretzicha gedoyla, and this great murderous urge. Kol kach lidrois v'litroif, to tear and to rip apart. V'lasois bebehemois maisois meshunim, and to do to their enemy. Who's the enemy? The domestic animals. To do with them, or not just domestic animals, the more softer animals like deer and entities like this, to go after them with such and to really, attack them in the most vicious manner possible. Which it expresses such a intense viciousness, which goes out, which is exemplary from the rest of the nature of all other created beings. Shall call shal habriyam, of other things. V'dafke bebehemois, and who do they target that vengeance, that anger? It's to animals, to the domestic animals. Shachayos yidrusu, in which the beasts see them, they flare into kind of almost like a rage, and they go after them. They yiftrafu asabehemois, and they'll rip and tear up these animals. V'hatzoin, and sheep, miyad bira oisam oisam. The moment they see them, they begin their prowl. Ve'ein tevazois nemtzas klal bebehemois. This nature is not there to be found in the farm animals at all. Sheyidrusu ve'yahargu zeh zeh, that they should stump and kill one another. Oimin achar zulasam, or another group. You don't have wars between sheep and goats, between cows and donkeys. They don't. Or even they don't fight back. From time to time, you'll watch, the buffalo turn on the lions in Africa. Today's days in YouTube, the whole world is brought to because people go all over, on these jungle tours. So you can watch all the fights between the animals. But so once in a while you'll have buffalo fight. But buffalo is a kind of wild beast too. But you don't see the revolt of the horses. Doesn't happen. And the like. Quite to the contrary. Tivam hafchim and teva achayis. The nature of the farm animals are different than the nature of the beasts. The opposite nature. They are the most tolerant. Shem soivlim oil. They accept domination. They accept the yoke. They tolerate the yoke. Can't put a yoke on a lion. Can't put a yoke on a big grayback gorilla. It won't allow you. It's not bending to be your servant. But a donkey stands there quietly, even though it's a strong beast. It allows itself to be saddled. It allows itself to you abuse him by loading up these heavy, heavy boxes and barrels. The same is also the horse. It allows himself that you should hook him up to this big carriage, and he has to schlep this. It's very, very heavy. Or the person to go riding on it. Shem soivlim oil, they take the yoke, and even an ox accepts this massive heavy yoke, and he pulls the plow, the enormous power he needs to do that. If he would use that muscle strength to fight the lions, boy oh boy would he unleash, but he just doesn't have it in him, does not have the energy, doesn't have that fire. That's the thing. It's not about physical strength, it's about that fire. And it's a sign, it's a different type of a soul. That's what he's getting at. It doesn't have to do so much with the engineering of the physical animal. Yes, when God engineers the physical animal, he makes probably the build of a lion is built. You see a cheetah, you see a tiger, or a leopard. These animals are built to facilitate such energy. So they're probably the way their muscles stretch and the whole chemistry of their build facilitates that, but that's not the source of it. The other animals, the farm animals, are built differently, even though the strength is the same or maybe even stronger. Yet it will not manifest in that manner. Shein soivlim oil, they take yoke, the oil hakoil, the yoke of everybody. Ve'ein bema toikif v'hakoach, farm kids, if they grow up in a farm, can go to this big beast, the horse, and dominate the horse for hours, and the horse will listen. He'll bring him, he'll take him, put on this, ride on him. Even as a little tiny little kid, because that's just the way it is. They definitely don't have the strength and the power to stand in opposition against these wild predatory animals. And they escape, they run for their life from them. They're subdued. They're terrified of them. And even if it's physically an animal that should have the capability to fight back, like we see the power of a horse. Gives an example. A horse encounters a fox. Let's say it's a little bit of a larger fox. Even though the horse is physically mightier than the fox, still the horse will get scared and will run from the fox. Will turn around from great dread. I wonder if I can find that on YouTube, a horse running away from a fox. The Alter Rebbe says that that's the way it is, so that's what it is. And according to what it is seen, this that the beasts have it in their nature, going back to the wild beasts, that they have it in their nature to rip and devour the animals. It has to do with some kind of a spiritual energy. In other words, when you trace these basically what I mentioned earlier is that there's a soul difference, but the soul difference comes from, because each one possesses certain, there's the physical animals and there's the energy of the animal, the soul of the animal. The soul of the animal also has a spiritual source. It is spiritual, and it comes from higher realms of spirituality. And as we know that up in heaven there are these entities, the angelic beings are called beasts. So because the reason why they're so anti, one group is anti the other group, it expresses itself in one always chasing and hounding down the other group, and the other one being so terrified and scared from this opposing force. That is because they are really two different categories of spiritual beings up there. They come from two complete different camps of different types of creatures. And their root above, and over there, the nature of their source, of these angelic beings, where they come from, the nature of these celestial beings is extremely different one from the other. And because they're so different, they come from a different group. And it's for that reason that when a tiger, a lion, a leopard sees a deer or or more like a tame animal, a sheep, a goat, or something like that, it provokes them, because up there they're in two opposing teams, two forces that not only are different than each other, but actually oppose each other. So when you see, that's why it's down here, it's not like it's a spiritual experience, it's an instinctive experience. But the instinctive reaction in the soul of the animal to have that reaction is because in their origins, it's two different powers, two different forces. This is because their root in the supernal chariot, if you trace them back, higher and higher, from rung to rung to rung to rung, the spiritual ladder, until their super original beginning. The pnei arya la yamin, where the face of the lion is on the right side. Pnei sharma hasmorl, in the face of the ox is on the left side. So we find that these animals are already mentioned in the divine chariot. These are the first recipients of godly energy. So on the right side is the lion, on the left side is the ox. Zeh b'kava yamin, so the lion is on the right side. Zeh b'kava smol, this one is on the left side. Hamanagid, which left and right, two opposites. You do it is known. The shayrish kol nefashes achayis nimshach mipnei aryeh. The lion is not only the lion in the supernal chariot, which is not a physical lion, not even a spiritual lion. It's a spiritual, very, 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 very sublime being. That's the source of all angels that belong to the right side. And then further on, it becomes the source of all animals, not only lions. All beasts are all descendants from this entity, the face of the lion above. We're going to see soon it's the archangel Michael. On the left side, the source of all domestic animals. And over there, in its source, it's an ox. It's an angelic being, super being, personified by an ox. And this ox is Gabriel, Gavriel. The source of all the souls of the animals, of the beasts, come from the face of the lion. And the root of all souls of domestic animals come from the ox. But according to this, but if this was the case, if it's just because they come from different teams, and therefore they bark at each other, that they should bark on each other, that the ones on the left should go as crazy when they see an entity from the right. We're seeing it even now by humans as well. How intolerant the right to the left and the left to the right are, right? And in the animal world, of course, but it should go both ways. Why is it that the entities, the animals from the right, are so vicious to the animals of the left, and the animals of the left are so terrified of the animals from the right, not reacting in the same way? So that's what he's asking. So it would have been fitting that even the domestic animals, again, they have what it takes to put up a fight. It's just they don't have the rage. They don't have that reaction. They freeze in terror from when they see an animal, a beast. Now, to make the question even stronger, was we would think it should be the opposite. That the on the left side should be the ferocious, intense, vicious ones, and on the right side there should be the more softer. Why? Because right is kindness, and left is severity. So because they come from the world of severity, of intensity, so they should be the ones that are like on fire, and the ones on the right should be the ones that are shying away from a confrontation, running away from it. And we see it's the opposite. It seems to be, as you trace them back, there's a crossover from one side to the other. The root of the line above, is in kindness. Liyamin, which kindness is to the right side. But when the lion comes down, it means it's the energy of love. But when this lion comes down, he doesn't seem like a beast of love. It seems like a beast of a devouring beast, a ferocious, terrifying beast. Ulamata, but when it comes down below, nahapach la'achzar, becomes a very cruel entity, litroif teref, to be a predator. B'pchenes hagvurois hakoshes, and to exercise or execute intense power of what seems to us, of course it's the nature of the animal, and no one is saying he's making an immoral choice, but he exhibits a certain cruelty, a certain lack of compassion, the opposite, that he makes its victim suffer, and he doesn't care how much he's, you ever see these, I like, okay, I'm going to admit, I like watching these animals. Sometimes I sit there, I got to I don't know, de-stress or whatever it is. On YouTube, I'll watch the videos happening in the jungle. This one attacking this. And sometimes I can't watch it. It's just so vicious. It's got this poor hippo, and it's got, or a hippo usually can fend for themselves. Yeah, but sometimes even a large animal, big animal. Yeah, sometimes a hippo, big animal, especially if it's a little smaller one. 20 lions, and they're literally ripping at its flesh. It's just horrible. And you wonder, like, what's with you like this? Like, you're ripping this entity alive. Or wildebeest or something like that. Your heart goes out for it. And when you wonder, where's the heart of the lion? They don't have any of it. They just want to kill. But how does it fit with the lion having its source in love? The Gam Yaduat is also known. The Aryeh, Gematria Reish Yud Vav. When we take a look at, we want to understand the etymology of something. So we look at the word Aryeh, which means lion. So Aleph Reish Yud Hey is Gematria 216, because the Reish is 200. And then you have an Yud K is 15, 215, plus an Aleph, 216. That's the exact Gematria of the word Gevura. Gevura is also 216. It's got the Reish, which is 200. And then 206, the Vav is 211. Vav and Hey is 6 and 5, 211. And then plus another 4, Gimel and Beis, 3 and 4. So 211 plus 4. Yeah, 211 plus, I'm sorry, Gimel and Beis is not 4, it's 5. 211 plus 5 is 216. So it's the Gematria, same Gematria of lion. Because the lion is the one who exemplifies Gevura, strength. But hold it, that's not its source. Its source is Chesed. It's on the right side. So that's the problem. Va'aryeh, we also know something else about the lion. If you rearrange the letters of the word Aryeh, you get the word Yira, fear. And we understand that. When you see a lion, you see might. You see power, sheer power and might. That's why it's the king of the jungle. But the lion is also, you got the fear, the Yira. I was once at a zoo, I think it was in Arizona with my family years ago. It was an amazing zoo. It was like one of the best zoos I've ever been to. In that it was wild cats, like so many of them. It was some kind of a rehabilitation center, whatever it was. I think it was in Phoenix. And my kid, we were standing there with the kids. We were looking the other direction. Behind the lion cage, we were looking at the other direction for something, I don't know, distracted. I think the lion was, lion says it's sleepy. So we looked at him, we turned around, and we were chilling. And suddenly it gave a roar. I never got so terrified in my life. And my kids, we almost fainted. We just jumped and that, like, whoa, we were really up close. It was really like, 3-4 feet away. It was behind this massive cage, but it was so close. And it made this massive roar. You hear a roar from like that, it's like a whole different. So it casts a fear. V'aryeh oisius yira, kamoy aryeh, like a aryeh shog. It says the lion roars. The pasuk says it. Mila yira, who's not afraid. So fear. Now, fear doesn't belong on the side of love, of chesed. Fear doesn't come from kindness. Fear comes from severity. V'ayira v'agvura, and we know fear and gevura and strength. Ubekava samoil is on the left side. Kenoid. But the face of the lion, is to the right side, in the realm of kindness. So how does it work? So we're doing a bit of zoology here tonight. We're trying to figure out the nature of animals and connecting them to their spiritual source above. It says in the pasuk, it says in the verse regarding the malachim above, the angels above, that the holy beasts are in a state of ratzo, racing forward, excitement, intense excitement, vishuv, and regression, returning back. They're constantly running forward and retracing their steps, retracting. Now, these are two different energies. The racing forward is intense love, expansion, expression, and the retraction is intense fear and constriction. And it says about all the animals above, all the malachim, all the angels, including the ones on the right side, which are all about expansion and love. Yet, there is a certain opposite effect of retraction. So so there is a certain, as we're going to see soon, iskalolus integration. Now, which we find regarding the beasts of the chariot, Nikram Gamkein B'Shem Serafim. Now we find that the angels, these malachim, in continuation to the idea that they have ratzo, that all the angels are in a state of, no matter if they're from this camp or from that camp, they all have the concept called ratzo. And therefore we find that in general they have a certain name that refers to all of them. And that they're all called Srafim. Srafim means we call them as serpents. They're burning with fire. Kamoi ha'aryeh layamin, like the lion that is on the right side, gamkei nikra saraf, is also called a fiery angel. Mashakasav, like it says, Srafim, the fiery ones, oimdim, stand in front of God. The kada ze'el zen, they call out one to the other, va'oimer, and they say kadosh, holy. Now, when we say that they're called these srafim, these fiery beings, and they call out kadosh, it's the roar. What's the roar? Again, all the nature we have in the animals down here is stemming from their spiritual source. Obviously, over there, it's very sublime and holy. By the time it gets down here, it becomes just a natural phenomenon of animalistic expression. But in its source, it's super holy, super godly. So what's the roar up there? It's the supernal lion roaring out of its excitement. It's this angelic cry or roar, la yamin, which the lion is on the right side, sheshayagim kadosh, that they roar, but their roar expresses the notion of holy, holy, holy. Now both camps are called Srafim. The camp of Michael and the camp of Gavriel on the left. Like it says, Vayof Elai Echot Min HaSrafim, the Yeshaya. Yeshaya has a prophecy, Isaiah has a prophecy, and he says, one of the serpents, one of these burning angels, flew over to me, because angels have wings, they flew over to me. So who is it? And we know who Michael. This angel is the Malach Michael who came flying over to him. Must be that it's, the Talmud of Masechtas Brachas says that this is Michael. Zohar, different place. The Inyan who, and the idea is, so you see that, now, I guess it's more important, more necessary, or it would be of greater necessary to explain that the Malach on the right side, Michael, is called the burning angel, Srafim. Because burning, fire, is more associated with the left. The right side is associated with water, kindness, flow. So therefore, the fact that Gavriel is called, whose name contains with the word Gevura, flaming fire, we understand that he's called Srafim, burning. But that Malach Michael, which is the source of all energy flow of love and kindness to the world, then we wouldn't expect him to be called a burning angel. Yes, he's also called a burning angel. The Inyan who, he's going to explain that there is fire in love, even though the angel Michael is an angel of love, but it's not the water. It has the water as element as well, but it contains within itself also passion, heat, and fire. And that's the fire of, and for that reason, even Michal is also called a fiery being. And when that fire is activated, it's all consuming. The Inyan who, and the idea is the B'chinas Madregas Ave Elokis, because the love, and these angels, what's their love? Their love is their love to Hashem. The B'chinas Madregas Ave Elokis, because the level of love to God, Kishehi B'chinas Espailos, when it gets excited. Hislavos, when the passion flares up, Berish Be'esh Betagburis Achuka Be'yoser, with flames of fire, with intensification of longing, Nikra Srafim, they are called Srafim. Sha'avasam Boyer, because their love is burning, Kisaraf Eish Mamish. Their love is burning like, literally like a blazing inferno. V'zeu b'chinas Aryeh Layamin, and that's the lion on the right side. Lion represents intensity. What's it doing on the right? Lion. It's the element of gevura that's on the right. It's the element of passion that's on the right. It's love. It's all about a loving energy. It's not fear. Fear is on the left side. It's love. But in the love, it's got the fire. When the love is very intense, when the love is mellow and calm, then it's love like water. Like we know that even in the human experience, in loving of Hashem, there's different types of love. There is the love that you feel very cuddled by God. You feel close, and that gives you a deep sense of connection to Hashem, like water connects. And then there could be the fiery, intense yearning and burning to experience godliness. Two different types of love. This is called love like water. This is called love like fire. So the archangel Michael, that's called the lion, it's because it has fiery love. Shezeu kamoi, and this is expressed in the roar. When the lion roars, is because Shezeu kamoi shagas aryeh b'takvoi, when the lion gives a intense roar. Vigvurasai, and it is power expressing his powerful might. When will a lion roar? Can sometimes, yawn roar, but when it's giving a real roar, it's kishachafetu misaval adavar ma, when it desires and it wants something, and it can't have it immediately. There's something there that is like, it desires very intensely, but there's something getting in the way, something threatening, something blocking. So it stands over there looking intensely and gives a roar with all of its power. Alkein Aryeh Gematria Gevura. That's what we said earlier. The lion is the Gematria of Gevura. Al Shem B'chinas his Gabrus. Because of this intensification, Koyach Ava B'yoser, even though it's a beast of, in essence, a beast of kindness, but it's the intensity of kindness. V'nikra B'chinas Gevura Shebechesed. It's in Chesed, it's the Gevura element of Chesed. Now, we're going to see soon he's going to go into this. Then, at least, then according to this, most of the time, the lion should be the friendliest guy on the block. It's just that you don't want to mess with him when he's hungry for lunch. It should be the nicest car. You need a favor? Go to your local lion. You need a ride? Go catch a lion, and maybe the lion will take you there because of its immense kindness and love. And that's not the case. It's down here. It doesn't seem that there's any kindness to the lion. Maybe it's kind to its mate and to its children, but that's about it. You don't see the energy of love expressed anywhere. But okay, we'll see about that. But at least in its source, the lion it's coming from a place of love, but love when love is in extreme passion and fire. Like we see in a person, like we see in a person that there's a certain gevura, there's a certain strength that can come. We know there's strength that can come out of hate and out of anger, two people get into a fist fight, because one guy, first they insult each other, road rage, they come out of the car, it's kind of motorcycle and a car, and before you know it, they're displaying immense power, usually much more than they generally feel, because they're in a fight and they're wrestling each other to the ground. So that's where the anger and the rage that they're feeling in their heart is bringing forth all this power and all this gevur. They throw an intense punch or whatever. But we also find that someone can unleash tremendous amount of energy, like for instance, leaping over something or doing something, running very fast, out of a intense passion or desire for something, because of love to something, having a very strong want for something. There can be also amazing, because that's called the gevura shebechesed, because it's love, but in the love, it's the intensity of the love. As we see, when a person has an intense love to something, this intense, the toikif of gevura will be in him, in a manner in which one will leap over, jump and leap with a lot of strength, more than they generally are capable of. Where do we find that? We see Rish Lakish. The Dalig Yared in it. Rabbi Yochanan was once hanging out by the local, by the riverbed, and he sees this gangster take an enormous leap and jump into the water and swimming at unbelievable strength. Rabbi Yochanan saw that, and he knew the person was, I don't know what he was going for, why he was in this. From here it seems like he's doing it because he saw something that he wanted to get or whatever. And it was an enormous display of power, of might. So Rabbi Yochanan yelled out to him, he told him, your strength should go to the Torah. This Rish Lakish was literally a notorious gangster, a robber, a highwayman. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't afraid, and he said, such strength. I mean, you imagine if you would use that strength for Torah, you would be an unbelievable scholar. And he looked up, and he saw Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan was the most magnificently beautiful person, physically beautiful. Rabbi Yochanan, I'll say beautiful, I'll say handsome for him, exquisitely good looking. So Rish Lakish turns back to him and he says, your beauty is for women. And you're telling me my strength for the Torah, your beauty for women. And then he exchanged Rabbi Yochanan, he asked Rabbi Yochanan, if I come learn in your yeshiva, if I turn around and drop my trade and I come learn in yeshiva, will you give me your sister? If you're so beautiful, I imagine your sister must be gorgeous. I want to marry your sister. So Rabbi Yochanan, they made a deal. You have to check if the sister wants to marry. That's another story. But I guess Rabbi Yochanan with pretty persuasive power. Anyways, he saw the potential in this man. And in the end, this Rish Lakish put in all that energy into the Torah learning, and he accelerated, and he became the peer of Rabbi Yochanan, became his chavrusi. And not only that, the Talmud is always saying that there's disputes and arguments between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So he became awesomely great. This is the quintessential, one of the greatest Baalei Tshuva of all time, Rish Lakish. But what you see from here is just proving it, that when you want something intensely, you can exhibit and unleash enormous strength. Same as also when a person desires something strongly, a person can screech and yell. I don't know what kind, I'm trying to figure that out. What kind of setting is that a person has this desire for something, and because of that, they omit this, what he doesn't, I know people can scream out of desire or want, but in a rash, in a commotion, noira, that's awesome, miyoid. I don't know what that means. The imkain, and if so, and now the same as we take that and bring it back to the lion. The roar of the lion which is the super being of love, of passion. So when that passion becomes intense, the roar of the lion is very, very, very noira. It's very awe-striking. When it wants something. So as it is down here, in the physical incarnation, we're watching life in its most, at the far end, where things become diluted to their small, little, tiny physical manifestation. All these energies, when they are in the spiritual, are just way, way, way far more impressive, way more intense, far more. So as we go that up, when we look at the face of the lion, that's on the right side, which even though it is kindness, which is on the right, in a state of love, very, very intense. And therefore, that's why it roars with a mighty sound. When it says Kaddish, and that's its passion for God. And that's what we mean. The beasts are racing. That's explaining this, the nature, as he says, in order to understand where the lion gets, who's on the right side, gets that ferociousness, that roar, that intensity, because love also has intensity. It's this ratzo, it's this racing of the intensity of the excitement of the longing. But it's still not satisfactory, the answer. Why is it? Okay, so you tell me that the animal below is reflecting the nature of the animal above. And over there, the animals above have very powerful longing for God. So they roar and they express their love. So the animals down here are also that type of animal that has that. They also have that, exhibit that feature of this intensity and where they roar. But according to that, they should only be roaring when they're excited about something that they want to be connected to. Why do we find that the animal is vicious? Like where does this energy flare up in this viciousness to destroy and to rip and to tear away? Where does this come from? How do you find that in this beautiful energy of love? Because this is the not so nice side of the beast. The idea is as follows: the ikar sibus toikef hislavus aryeh. Because when we take a look and we want to know what is really the primary, if you go deeper, the provocative energy that provokes the lion, what is it really? Ba'avalomaila, in its love above, it's really sparked when there is an opposition. The force of intense love that's called roaring, and this intensity unleashed is a reaction to something blocking and getting in the way. Spiritually, it's the angels above sensing their inability to touch and to connect, to perceive the divine, to experience the divine, because it's elusive. They appreciate the sweetness, the blissfulness, the ecstasy of it. They understand how unbelievably extraordinary, otherworldly this would be for them to be able to touch it, experience and feel it and know it. But they can't. And that's what drives them crazy to a point of this frenzy of roaring. Imagine that. Millions of lions. We're talking about lions. Let's take every lion you've ever seen and amplify that lion, 1,000 lions in one lion, or 10,000, or 100,000 of these super beasts. No, I'm just giving it a physical imagery. But imagine in endless of it, and they're roaring with this nonstop. Why? They're longing to perceive God, and they can't. It's that block that's provoking it. And he's going to elaborate, but he's going to bring, and that's the reason down here below. And what do they want? They want to break that barrier. They want to tear away that barrier so that they can actually experience the divine. So including in that passion is the frustration with what's blocking. Because there's so much pent up frustration and anger, so to speak, against what's blocking them, that trickles down. And in their great, in this genealogy line, in this great grandson, so to speak, grandchildren, a gazillion levels down, this frustration translates into the same idea that a lion is immensely frustrated with anything that's opposite it. Its reaction is to something that's opposite it. And what's opposite to the lion is what? Is the gevura, the block. Gevura is associated with tzimtzum and block. So since the animals come from the world of gevura, from the world of the other side, they rip it up. And that's amazing explanation for this nature of a lion from a deep Kabbalistic spiritual understanding of what's going on. Not everything could be explained just on the brain cells and enzymes released and so on and so forth, in which they will tell you in the biology class. The biology, the physical, is just a vessel, a container for deep spiritual dynamics. The lion roars above because it wants to overcome a block. So it's antagonized by a force that's blocking. As he explains over here, the lion with love above, is because of an opposition. It's because the godly light is holy and separated. Alkain, therefore, sha'ag yishag b'koil rash. The lion roars with this intense commotion, b'toikiv gadol b'yoser, with this enormous intensity. V'ikra slavos hu al b'chinas hamenagid. Its main passion, its main flare-up is on what is blocking it. Is that there's this blockage that's obscuring the lion from being able to comprehend the godly light. And he wants it so desperately. He wants it so much. That's what brings forth the primary reason for why the lion roars. That's the gevura of chesed, because it's the gevura, it's a power to overcome on the entity that's holding back and opposing the kindness. And we see that in the lion down here below, which we'll see, so also in the physical lion. It's when the lion roars when it wants something. So generally, if you throw him, if you come feeding time to the lion cage, and you're not late, like Noach was late when he fed the lion. But if you fed the lion, 20 minutes before lunchtime, and you give him its food, and he wakes up from his snoring sleep, and he sees the meat over there, well, he'll go over and he'll have himself a couple of steaks, just like that, without any roars. It may make some sounds of enjoyment, but that's about it. But when he's getting hungry and you're not feeding him, or you're dangling the meat outside of the cage, or in the jungle out there in the Serengeti, if there is food but he can't get to it, that causes him to get frustrated. That's when he roars. When he's lacking the food, when he's hungry to eat. This is already interfering with what the lion wants. His stomach is growling. He or her stomach is growling. They want lunch. They want dinner, and they don't have it. Haven't eaten for days. When it doesn't have what it desires. Also when you provoke it by upsetting it, by getting on its nerves, by doing something the lion really displeases. You mess with it. Then it flies into a rage. The yisoyre, and it will awaken lamoid to get up legabe amenagdoi, to oppose the entity that's standing against him, betoykif hagvura beyoser, with very, very intense might. Oy, or beyoser mishtoykik letavosai, or if in a way where not just it doesn't have food, when it wants a certain taiva, when it has a desire for something, ve'ein manichanoi, saying you don't let him. When it comes mating season and the lion wants to mate, it sees the female lion and wants to go at her. And if you get in the way of that, boy oh boy, the Zohar says the worst thing anybody can do is to get between the lion and the lioness at mating season. When the male lion and the female lion are standing one to each other, woe to the person who accidentally trespasses in their path. And the like. It's like we see the same thing with a bear. We always know. We have bearing counts. The worst thing you can do is get between the bear and its cubs, mother bear and its cubs. And if she feels threatened, you're threatening her existence, she'll go into a rage. That's when a bear is dangerous. Usually they'll mind their own business, but if she feels you're threatening their child, forget about it. She loses it. Same idea, that when there's something opposing or perceived as opposing thing. Okay, and that's, you have these lion whisperers, people that they have this talent and this ability to make themselves completely be perceived by the lions as a completely non-threat. When they trust you and they don't see any threatening element in you, then they're totally fine with you. That you can lay together with them and they'll lick you and they'll roll with you and frolic with you. Big lions. You have these, it's amazing sometimes. You watch this. How do they do it? They just have that. They train that. It's not so much training the lions, it's more training themselves to be able to be with utter kindness and not give off any kind of sense that they're interfering with the lions. Quite in the contrary, then they're fine. And the same as, so this is, he says, when you get between them and they're mating, so when they have this is what arouses this ferociousness that's there towards anything that's threatening them. So, but we only find this in animals like this. I mentioned the real wild beasts, dangerous beasts, lion and the like. The tiger, the leopard, that's all the same family. Because its desire and its want to anything is with an energy. When it wants something, like we know sometimes we feel this intense desire for something. We're hungry, we didn't eat, we have this... and sometimes it can go overboard. It can be very intense. And we have to deal with it and try to control it. But as intense as it is, doesn't come close to the intensity of the passion firing up in the heart, in the emotion of the lion. Obviously this is all an instinctive process, but it's so intense. Its excitement is far more because we humans don't come from that source. Our souls are not plugged in to a place of such intense, passionate flare-up. For it to go in so strong. It's like on a car, People drive the car 70 miles per hour, 80 per hour. And sometimes you push down on the odometer and it goes, shoots up to 120, 130, 150. That's where the lion is. Every moment, you any little thing, and when it wants, and there's no way, it instantly goes into this intense, its engine goes so quickly into the motor, gets so quickly driven up to this. That's why it can race with such intensity. It pounces with such intensity. It rips with such intensity. Because its soul is like running on, like literally accelerating on this enormous crazy speed. We don't get excited that way. We would be capable of being much worse predatory beings, but we don't have that intensity happening to us as part of the human experience. Therefore, and it will particularly be directed, as we said, against the one that is opposing him. Dafka. Shesham, as we asked earlier, why is it that every time it sees a deer, it has that flare up? Because they come from the left side. Shesham hu ba b'toikef his pashtus b'tachlis. Over there, the animal will unleash its complete energy, koicha, its power, ugvarasa, and its might. Harbi yoser, much more. When it doesn't have anything, when it doesn't have anything provoking it, anything standing in its way. So roar a little bit, jump a little bit, run a little bit, but it doesn't. Its soul is not. Its energy is not in any way an acceleration. You don't see it so much. When there is an opposing thing, when there is an opposing force, that's when it reveals itself and expands more. Because when you don't mess with the lion, and you're not doing anything against its will, and you have to be lucky also that the lion is not too hungry. Okay, even the lion whisperer has to be lucky that the lions are kind of not too hungry at that time. Then it looks like a lazy creature that just lays and snores and doesn't do anything. When something is opposing it, that's when it flares up. The ultimate of its power and its might, as it is known. And so this could literally also be seen. See, the nature of the soul is the nature of fire flaring up. So we see that in fire as well. That's the way fire works. That fire will also be, it can burn a calm fire. But when wind comes or something that's threatening the fire, that's when the fire grows. Or when there's some kind of a moisture, or even though the fire is attacking substance, that's not fire. And the fire wants to overcome this substance, to say, I'm the boss, I'm going to eat you. That's when the fire suddenly grows and becomes intense and the heat grows. Because there is a force that's blocking its way. That's the way it always works. It reacts to an opposing force. Because the flame becomes aroused. With a great commotion, and very, very, very frightening. When it's surrounded with these entities that are blocking it. If there's a lot of wood grows, and in order for it to be part of in the vegetative world, it needs water. Water makes things grow. So there is water in the tree. There is water in the wood. And therefore, when the fire is now going on the wood, it senses the water. So to overcome the water, it goes out, all out war. And that's what causes the fire to flare up and to become so loud. First of all, it makes noises, it crackles, it sounds, and it burns. Because in the wood there is the element of water, which is the opposite of it. And it opposes it. That's when the fire will burn with a great commotion and a lot of power. With a great expansion. In a manner in where there is a lot of koach in this fire, more than the nature of the fire on its own. That's the reason why it's called a furnace, a big fire. It's called a deleka. Deleka comes from the word to jump. It jumps with enormous power. It leaps from place to place. Like we find that Yaakov Avinu says to Lavan, because Yaakov traveled for 7 days. Lavan did the entire distance that Yaakov traveled for 7 days in 1 day. That means that he must have been galloping at this enormous speed. So Yaakov says to him, why did you dalakta? What's you leaping after me, which also means, what's this fire? That means I must be, you're so enraged. Dalakta. And a fire is called dalakta. Kidu as it is known. And if there's no opposition to the fire, doesn't expand so much. It doesn't have the intensity of this excitement. For example, he says, you have a fire on a candle, a fire in a lamp. Quiet, burns, minds its own business. not drawing attention, quiet. The light of a lamp is burning quietly, because there's no interference, no one is threatening the fire. When there is opposition, because there's a lot of wood, or a maybe cotton, I'm not exactly sure what the oris is. Fire takes hold of it to burn it, or to completely extinguish it. Now, even the water also has that nature. That water will also get excited when fire falls onto it. The water starts bubbling, and it's not making a commotion like fire. It doesn't have that. The fire has that. Now, in truth, there is a little bit of water in fire and fire in water. And even though they're opposing, totally diametrically opposed, as it is known. Very dry wood. We know dry brush is what causes massive fire. When it's wet brush, not so much, but dry brush. The fire will flare up. From then brush that's very wet. So what does he want from this? This should have been opposing the whole idea. He's saying that where there is an opposition. So you would think the more water there is, the more you'll hear crackle and noise, but you won't have such a big, crazy fire. It's not fuel for fire. When it's dry, it is. So how is this? When I was reading this earlier, I didn't really see what he wants to say over here. It seems to be saying something that is opposing what he was saying till now. So I'm not exactly sure. As he says, I guess I don't understand what he says over here. Okay, it has something to do with the fact that water is mixed with fire and fire is mixed with water. And water will get excited from the heat of the fire. Okay, I'm not sure what this line. As it is in parentheses. As it is known, the whole shall have his as we can all see, just in physics, that every fire that is not burning and consuming something, doesn't have a flare up. It doesn't have a commotion and a flare up to it. However, when it's overcoming and consuming something that's standing against it, then it becomes very intense. We said earlier, with the roar of the lion, which is only fighting in opposition. This mimer is a very expansive mimer. You can see this. It's not discussed. Sometimes you get mimer, especially in Torah, which are so condensed. This will be understood with added explanation. By way of analogy, this that we see. Now he's going to connect it to a spiritual experience, a human spiritual experience. And that is where a person gets excited with flames of fire during davening. But a person will cry out. So, with a commotion. So if you ever went to Karlin and Shul, you'll hear people screaming with a commotion. Not necessarily is what he's talking about, because there's a kind of a training to do that. I'm sure there are moments where a lot of people get to a place where that shouting, I guess, helps out to it. But here he's talking about not a style of davening where you're shouting and clapping your hands and making a lot of noise, but a sudden rapture. The Alter Rebbe would suddenly go into it, when he would daven, would go into a flare-up, literally. He would go rolling in the room. Rabbi Akiva would start one place in one corner and he would end in the other corner. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditch, it was dangerous to be in the shul when he was there. Literally a fireball. And this is when the excitement flares up. From the longing that's just so intense. But there too, we find that what causes the noisy rapture, this noisy explosion, is mitzad b'chenes hamenagid. Again, when there is something interfering. Because during davening, the worshiper, the one who's davening, wants to see and wants to comprehend the essence of the infinite one. The kula kameh, where all before him is naught, and he wants to touch that place, connect to that place, experience it. Like King David says, my soul is expiring. Mosai Ovai, when can I come? David HaMelech is crying out, when? I miss it so much. I so desperately need it. When can I come? And see the face of God, as it says in Tehillim, Pei Daled, Pasuk Gimel. Ve'enoi masig, and you don't grasp. We turn over the page 144. Mishum the lace, because you can't perceive God. So you want it so badly, but you can't. Al-Kain, therefore, Mizgah Berish Be'esh. Person then, it intensifies within him the flames of fire, his lavos be'yoser. The fiery flames very much. Now, what he's trying to explain over here is not only that we too have within our experience this fiery element, and that it's primarily flares up when we feel that we're hitting a brick wall. We're trying to pass this unbridgeable pass between the finite and the infinite. We're touching, we sense it, and we're trying to read it. We can't, and that's what causes the rapture, the wildness in prayer. That's one thing, of course. He wants to show it in our experience too, but he also wants to show how that produces other manifestations where that energy will go towards an opposing force. One will lead to a much lower expression of excitement and fervor against something blocking. Just like he's explaining with the angels. Angels above, they have intense love to God, to the fact that they roar. But what's provoking it is the block. And as that translates down, the long evolutionary line of worlds until we get to the physical. So down here below, the lion that its spiritual grandfather is the archangel above Michael, and all those malachim that are dying out of this rapturing out of love, but fighting the opposition, they will pounce on a rabbit, on a sheep, on a goat, on a thing, also with that ferociousness to destroy it. So he's explaining that we see that in our human experience as well. Davening can sometimes lead to not the best reactions in our interpersonal relationships. Good davening. Because people who daven really, really well and therefore have a very strong passion to godliness are more likely, more prone to get angry at people. Maybe you might justify it as a good anger, to get angry at people that are doing things that are maybe not so good. And they go into a rage and upsetness and a fiery reaction towards others that are misbehaving. Not always the best thing to do. Usually it's not too productive to get angry or yell or, shh, during davening. It doesn't. But it's the ones that are davening with fire and passion and fervor, they're the ones who get angry about those that are interfering with it. Or it doesn't only mean interfering with their davening. Even when they're done davening, they're interfering with godliness. They have such a passion for godliness. Anybody that's doing anything in this world that's blocking God gets them very angry. So here you see the same idea, that from a higher fire comes a lower fire. One is a derivative from the other. Or machmazeh mistaf emerges these intense gevuros and that which is opposing it, that stands against the divine. Like we see, the more of a fiery davener this person is, the more they intolerant, v'charoin af, and anger, eish shalheves, literally, fiery flames, mamish, literally, ala reshoyim ha'osim ra be'enei Hashem, on wicked people that do bad in the eyes of God, umordim b'teirasei, and rebel against this Torah, they can't tolerate it. Chol she'eino b'b'chenes eslavos, klal, and those that are cold-tempered in their Jewishness. In other words, it's not that they're not devoted. They can be extremely deeply devoted, but it's without the fire element. So they're kind of chilled when they see things that are not that godly or not things of this. They don't like it, but it doesn't call forth this intense reaction. Yizbal Yosef as Amenagdim will tolerate more that which is opposing of holiness. You see, it's the idea of the fire. Where there is fire, fire's nature is to burn something that's opposing it. So those who serve God with the energy of fire, they're more likely to release that fire also against that which is they perceive as a interference. So is it that the flames of fire, of the godly fire, shebetfila b'tzadik, we're talking about a tzaddik, a real tzaddik, a saintly person that's davening, mizgaber b'yoser, becomes intensified. Kisharoya b'chenes menagid, when he sees an opposing force, kamoy arishoyim, like the wicked, shemenagdim b'yoser lolakus, that oppose godliness with all the Hazohar, like sometimes you look in the world today and you see entire movements that present ideas that we know God despises, brings total moral decay and deep spiritual destruction in the world. And sometimes you get very angry when you see it. So generally, that's someone who's more of a passionate in his Judaism will experience that passion and that anger as well. So much so that you would literally go and burn that entity, that wickedness, bones, if you're able to. Can you do as it is known? Like fire that burns wood. And this is what the sages say, are hinting to when they say Rishayim, that the wicked Nasu Efer become ash tachas kapras raglei tzadikim, under the feet of the righteous. Some kind of a punishment, some kind of a prediction on the future, that the wicked become ash under the feet of the righteous. What does that mean? If the tzaddikim go look for their ashes and dance on it? No, it's because the tzaddik burnt them. So since the tzaddik burnt them with their fire, so that's why they're ash at the bottom. But what does that mean? It means that the rage, the intolerance of the tzaddik to the wicked destroys the wicked. The flames of fire of holiness of the tzaddikim, burns the wicked, hamenagdim, that are opposing v'nasim efer mamish, and literally it makes them into ash. All of this Yuvin Tam, with all of this, we'll understand Inyana Aryeh, the idea of the lion, that is so ferocious and so a force that rips and tears. This is its prevailing over against the side that is interfering and getting in his way, to the point that it can damage it literally. Just like fire, that burns and consumes, or the flames of a tzaddik, that burns and annihilates the wicked. And even though above, the lion is on the right side, still Aryeh Gematria Gevura. Aryeh, and the right is kindness, yet the lion is Gematria Gevura. Why? Because it's true, it's love, but it's the intensity of love. Love is usually water, as we said, it's the fire in the water. It's the intensification of love, of holiness, the godly love, which finds expression in intense ratzai, racing energy of desire to be consumed in God. But that's the way it is up there. But from that is derived down below, can become very intolerant gevuros, harsh gevura, a harsh power of gevura, of might. The aryeh of the lion, litroif lebehemos, to actually destroy and kill animals. From that which is understood of all of this, it's an awesome explanation on the nature of these beasts. But we still need to understand, he gufa, this itself. Lama yesh ba'aryeh la'yamin. So here's the question. Could we find that, we know in the rule is that there, in Kedusha there is a skalalut, there is integration. God created the world in a manner of integration where things live as components of opposite forces. Everything is a blend. In Klippa, in the unholy, things disintegrate. Everything moves into its own. There isn't this cohesiveness, this synchronization. So we understand that even the right side has an element of Gevurah. But this doesn't explain why we see that the element of Gevurah is the most pronounced by the lion who's coming from the light side. It should be that the animals from the left, they should have a lot in amazing Gevurah. Very, very much Gevurah. They also have kindness. The ones on the right side should have immense mellowness and love and happiness and calmness, And from time to time, the passage describes that Moshe got angry, Time to time, there is if their soul is made up of kindness, how does it happen? There is Gevurah there as well. And when it's intense, okay. Why is it that Dafka the lion, Dafka the creatures of the right, the Gevurah is so pronounced? That's the question. He gufa, this itself. Lama yesh ba'aryeh lahayamin, in the lion of the right side, shu b'chinas hachesed, which is the element of kindness, k'moi b'chinas teva eish, it's as if the fire completely takes it over, the nature of fire, shemizgabed ala menagid, that prevails over that which is standing against it. Hareya eish b'kava smoil, fire is on the left side, v'mayim b'kava yamin, and water is on the right side. K'moi Michael v'Gavriel. We know Michael and Gabriel, Michael and Gabriel. Michael is the minister of water, and Gabriel is the minister of fire. Sar shel eish v'sar shel mayim. Achine, however, the idea is as follows: Hasrafim she'omrim kadosh and Michael v'Gabriel. Both sides say kadosh. Okay. V'gam inyan ratzei v'shuv, and therefore also the idea of ratzei v'shuv, racing and retracting. Is done together. The angels, there's a cohesiveness over there. And it's all by these chayos. That these angels are both. So we see an integration of water. The rotzo is the fire element. The shuv is the returning, the calming down and returning back to themselves. That's the water element. And yet we find that those on the right have the others and those on the left. But here's an interesting thing. Sometimes dafka in the field of in the domain of the opposite of one particular force, it is more noticeable, the features of something opposite. It's like weird, on a white board, you notice the black writing. On a blackboard, you don't notice the black writing. And on a blackboard, you notice the white chalk. So the white is displayed on the black, and the black is displayed on the white, because it becomes highlighted, contrasted with the background. So because of that, Gevurah is highlighted on the right, because since the backdrop on the right is white and kindness, so the Gevurah is very in your face, because it catches your attention, because the setting, the background setting is all kindness. Versus on the other side, where where its essence is Gevurah, you don't notice the Gevurah, because the Gevurah is everything. What you notice is a streak of kindness. So on the left side, you see the kindness. There's a certain exchange that takes place. So when you see people with certain nature, it doesn't always, sometimes your eye can fool you. Sometimes it can be that you say this person is not a kind person, they're a severe person. No, maybe they're a very kind person, and the severity is noticed because their entire essence is kindness. And that's why you're noticing, just like on the whiteboard, you're noticing the black writing. Sometimes it's not that way. I'm not saying every element is always that. Sometimes you're noticing the essence of what the person really is. But at times, there can be a mix-up and a misunderstanding in the nature of something just because you see it behaving. For example, if someone looked at Avram Avinu while he was doing the Akedas Yitzchak, while he was taking Yitzchak and binding him on the Mizbeach, didn't get the impression that you're dealing with the most loving, kindest, nicest human being in the world. I know it was God's commandment, and it was love, because he was doing it out of intense love to God. But when he was taking it, seemed to be an act of, he had to exhibit, he had to find within himself a certain cruelty, a certain gevura to be able to do this. Even though Yaakov is a man of kindness. And when Yitzchak is being so playful with his son and loving Esav, he's the wicked guy, and Yitzchak, who's supposed to be the essence of discipline, Esav's got him wrapped around his finger, it looks like. And he has such a good relationship with them. He's such a good parent, Yitzchak. Instead of being the angry father kicking him out of the house. So here, Avram is acting to Yitzchak, the tzaddik, and binding him. And Yitzchak, who's the man, and he's the man of kindness. And Yitzchak is not taking Esav on an altar and binding him and slaughtering him. Yitzchak is having parties with him. Says, come, I'll give you a big blessing and everything. So how does that work? Because Yitzchak is Gevura. You notice when you see that blessing, it's very pronounced. Avram is Chesed, and when he does Gevura, it's very in your face. So that's the idea that he's explaining over here. The fire on the right side is more pronounced, Vashuv behelim, and the concealment, the returning, the kind energy is more concealed, just because it's more the essence over here. That's why it's not so noticed. That's by the lion on the right side. And the ox on the left, lehepech is the opposite. Shashuv begiloi, the returning energy, the calmness and the mellowness and which is a feature of kindness, is something you notice very much when you're in his turf, because since the essence over here is really intense, is really gevura. When it's acting opposite of it, it's noticed. Shashuv begili v'ratze behelim. K'inyan eskalus Avram v'Yitzchak, like this integration of Avram and Yitzchak, which is Bar Bezhem, like explained elsewhere. And therefore, so this idea of prevailing over the opposition, which is a fiery element, this fire you'll more notice on the right side. Nikr Yosef is more recognizable on the lion on the right. Shu Eish Shebemayim, because it's the fire that's in water, so you notice the fire. Umayim Shebe'eish Hu B'shuv, and the opposite. In the left side, which is fire in essence, you'll notice, and it's more discernible, the water, that these angels are more calmer, even though in essence it's the opposite. Pnei Shor, in the face of the ox. As stated elsewhere, fascinating idea that the Zohar says. The Zohar says, Be'inyan, Benoihi da Avraham begalusa de Edom. The children of Avram are in exile under the domain of Edom. Ubenoyi de Yitzchak, and the children of Isaac, begalusa de Yishmael, are in the exile of Yishmael. The Zohar seems to be making reference to the split, the great split that there is in the Jewish people. Ashkenazim and Sephardim. Those who lived in the truth is, which turned out most of the time, not all the time. Sephardim are called Sephardim because they call from Spain, and Spain was actually fluctuating between the Muslims and the Christians, but at least the Christians had a very strong hold over Spain, and the Christians are the spiritual heirs of Edom. But that's regarding Spain. But eventually, Sephardim lived primarily, everything's primarily, not in a Christian world, but in the Islamic places, and the Ashkenazim are in the living in the Christian countries, which is in the world of Edom, which Edom is Esav. So you would think, so this split, the Zohar says an interesting thing. The spiritual source of these different Jews, Sephardim and Ashkenazim, we all come from all three patriarchs. We all come from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They're the father of each and every one of us, all of them. But yet, there are those children whose Avram's energy is dominant in them. They are dominated by Avram Avinu. Avram is a very dominant element in their soul. Then there are Jews who Isaac, Yitzchak, dominates their energy of their neshama. And obviously these are more chesed Jews, and these are more gevura Jews. Yet, the Zohar says that there is an exchange taking place over here. Avram was the father of Yishmael, of the Muslim world. His Jewish prodigy, his Jewish children, meaning those that have his energy, aren't hosted by Yishmael. They're hosted across by Yitzchak's. Avram has a klipa, Yishmael, which turns into Islam. Isaac has a klipa, which is Esav, as it says, like Yitzchak sheyatzem emen Esav. Esav comes out of Yitzchak. Esav we know is a klipa of Gevura. Yishmael is a klipa of Chesed. Now both Avram and Yitzchak have a holy side, and that is their Jewish descendants, which, as we said before, some Jews belong more to Avram, and some Jews' souls belong more to Yitzchak. Now it would make sense that the Avram Jews, the Jews who are essentially Chesed energy Jews, they should be, in the time of exile, hang out with their cousins, the children of Yishmael, be under their domain, because Chesed goes into Chesed. And challenged by the klipa of Chesed, which is Yishmael's klipa, unholy love. Yitzchak's descendants, which are Gevura, essentially Gevura-diga Jews, should be spending this long night of exile in Esav's territory, by his kinship, by his brother, by his counterforce, the klipa of Esav. The Zohar says it's not that way. The children of Yitzchak, the Jews belonging to Yitzchak, end up in Avram's klipa and Yishmael's domain, and Avram's children, dominated by the Avram energy, end up in the world of Esav. Which would mean an interesting thing based on this, that the Ashkenazic breed, so to speak, of the Jewish world is a primarily Avram energy. And that's why, where did we end up to spend this long night of Golus? In the Yitzchak, cross over into Yitzchak's territory, into Esav's world. And do the tikkun in the world of Esav, dafka the Avram Jews. The Yitzchak Jews, they go into Avram's territory, into which is Yishmael, and do the tikkun in Yishmael. So how does it work? Why is it that way? So the idea is as follows. It's true, in order to fix chesed of klipa, the chesed of unholiness, you need holy love. But for that, you don't bring Avram's children. Because since Avram's children, their love is who their essence is. The kindness is that essence. So the essence is not, so the kindness is not pronounced. It's not noticeable. It gets lost. Like looking at a whiteboard. You don't see the whiteness. You don't see it. You don't see a whiteboard, whatever. You have to look at a blackboard to notice the whiteness. So we bring in Yitzchak's children who are rooted in Gevura, but what's pronounced and seen in them is a lot of chesed energy. And that's why they can fix the world of Yishmael, by producing that chesed to counter the unholy chesed of Yishmael. So if you take a look, he doesn't say this clearly, but you could possibly say, Ashkenazim Jews are a little more stiff, rigid. So a comedian sent me, I didn't get this from a comedian, someone just yesterday sent me a clip of some comedian that was WhatsApp me a clip that was doing humor between the difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and it was just so funny. The way he was describing how, just one of the lines, describing how when you go to a shul and you call up a Sephardi to the Sefer Torah, you give him an aliyah. First of all, he comes up and everybody, Chazak Baruch, everybody's clapping, shaking everybody's hand, everybody's so happy for him, Chazak Baruch, and he's so happy. It doesn't make any which aliyah he gets. He says, "Oh, I got the best aliyah. This is the one from Jacob. This is the one." He's happy, and you see that energy of love like pouring out, that closeness, that warmth. The Ashkenazic Jew comes up, you call him an aliyah, he looks like he's got a constipation or something. He's coming, and then he's not happy with the aliyah. I should have gotten this, which is very funny. I was describing it. There's a certain partying and a certain warmth that the Sephardic community has. And over here in the Maimer, it's not because they're from the world of Chesed, they're from the world of Gevurah, from the world of Yitzchak, but because of that, the Chesed is so pronounced, it's so felt, it's the energy of love is so intense. And the energy of, not to take on the Ashkenazim, but Ashkenazim have more of a certain, the seriousness and the rigidity regarding observance, and in more of an intense way. That's because they, in essence, are entities of Chesed, and therefore the Gevurah element, the restriction element, and the boundaries, and the halach, all that is more sensed and pronounced and projected. Interesting idea. Va'alken, as he says, each one hangs out with their opposing force. Because that's when its power is more noticeable and recognized. The children of Avram, that are from Chesed, Begalusa de Edom, they hang out in the Golus of Edom. Pchenes HaGvuros, which is where the Gevurah takes place. Beyira Dafka, and therefore their main fear of God, their main service of God is Yira, fear. That's where you got this notion called Charedim. Charedim from the word Chared. I can't stake that word Charedim because it just annoys me to no end. I'm sorry. It's because it just indicates such stiffness and such rigidity. Observant I like much better. Even Dati I'm not so happy so much with. It's those who love Torah and mitzvot, that's what we should call. But that's the word. Chared means fear. That's the nature of the Ashkenazic Jew, meaning on the expressed side. Ubenoi the Yitzchak, but the children of Yitzchak, Pchenes HaGevurah, of Gevurah, Begalusa de Yishmael, are in the Galus of Yishmael. Bepchenas Ava, in the element of love. V'zahu ha'hefresh ben b'nei Eretz Yisrael b'nei Bavel. We also find a difference between, in the time of the Mishnah, back then, there were the Jews who were living in what the Gemara calls B'marava in the west, that's in the land of Israel, and those who were living in Babylonia. V'chutz li'aretz, b'nei Eretz Yisrael, the children of Eretz Yisrael, ba'ava. There was more of a service of God of love, meaning more of that, as we said before, Sephardic kind of a thing. And that's an indication that they were more rooted in Yitzchak's energy. And we know that Yitzchak is not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. That could be. So there. The Eretz Yisrael, the Chasidei de Bavel. The Gemara asks, what's the difference between the Tkifim of Eretz Yisrael and the Chasidim of Bavel? The Gemara 42. So it's interesting. You call them Tkifi de Eretz Yisrael. Takuf is Gevurah. Yet, he says they serve God with love. Because as we said before, those that are Tkifim of Gevurah, the love is seen very much. And how do we call the Babylonians, who essentially are Gevurah, who serve God with fear, more with fear? We call them Chasidei de Bavel, which is Chasidim comes from the word Chesed. So that means, that's because Tkifi and Chasid is referring to their essence. They are essential Gevurah and they serve God with love. They're essentially Chesed and they serve God with fear. What's over here? Again, I didn't get a chance to look up that Gemara to see how the Gemara. Also, one of the things I'd like to look up and come back and clarify next class. Ubnei Bavel b'yira, the Bnei Bavel with fear. Al derech. So the people of Eretz Yisrael are more easier going with each other, like water. Ubnei Bavel, the people of Bavel b'yira. Al derech b'makim gila dafke sham te'irada. So the idea is, like Chazal also say, in the place where there is fear, where there is joy, over there should be fear. Since, in essence, the Ashkenazic soul is the gila, is the more naturally Avram energy of joy, and there has to be an implementation of a lot of constriction and a lot of rigidity. The Sephardic neshama is a more intense soul. It needs to express itself much more and live more in the world of chesed. And that's why the lion is what has the eish, the fire. Now, there are places where it's explained the opposite regarding the children of Eretz Yisrael, the Bnei Eretz Yisrael b'yira, that the children of Eretz Yisrael is in fear. But he doesn't give 46. He says, look in the Maimer Tavkov Samach Tes, and over there where it explains. So there is an interchange. Okay. All of this was to explain the lion. Now we're going to speak about the domestic animals and the ox. And I told you, this is a zoology class. And all of this is to explain why the children of Yaakov, some of them are referred to as beasts. Like Yehuda, done as a snake, and Binyamin as a wolf. And others like Yisachar is compared to a donkey, and Naphtali is compared to a gazelle. Two different types of animals. The face of the ox that's on the left side, who is a complete opposite nature of the face of the lion that's on the right. Like we see below. It is the nature of the physical ox. It's the total opposite, complete flip from the nature of the lion. The nature of the ox, it accepts a yoke on its neck. To be productive, to work, to pull the plow. And its nature is programmed to receive any yoke, v'shibud, and enslavement, mikol adam, from any person. It surrenders immediately. Like it says, kishar la'oil, like an ox for a yoke. In all animals, you don't have such a nature of being such a mighty beast, yet so submissive. Kol kach. Now you have other animals. The horse is pretty submissive. The donkey is, but they won't tolerate such a heavy yoke on their neck. No, only the ox has that. L'kabel oil kasha, to accept such a heavy yoke. B'savlonis gedoylem, be so patient. Kamoy ashar, like the ox. V'afal pisha koiche chazak b'yoser, even though he's a mighty beast that has enormous strength. Kamoy shakasav, as it says, v'rav tvois, the production of abundance of food, of grain, it's with the power of the ox, because only the ox has that power. Today they use tractors, but before tractors, the ox was the tractor. With the power of the ox. But again, even though in physical strength, if you have a hand wrestle with a lion, that's how the lion will win. He's got the might. No, dafka, but it's expressed dafka lisa oil. It uses that might in its submission. In its submission, it will work for you like this unbelievable heavyweight champion, but not in a war, not in a fight, as a slave. Lisa oil covered beyoser, to carry this heavy yoke. This is a very strong bittul, surrender, and achna lizbal alatzmai oil covered, to withstand on himself this heavy yoke. There's a hepech mamish miteva hari. This is the total opposite of the nature of the lion. Don't tell a lion what to do. You know, if they want to, we all know that when they these zookeepers or even in the outside in the wild, in these big, huge, what are they called? What's the word there? No, in Africa you have these game parks, or not game parks. They have these protected areas. You're not allowed to hunt. Safaris. So in these places, and if they need to tag the animals and they want to they have to tranquilize them. They shoot them with a dart, puts them to sleep, and only in that deep sleep they're able to go there and put on a new brace and a new necklace and a tracker and all these things. They do it with even huge bears and all that, but only after they tranquilize them. A lion, these beasts will never take it, and the ox surrenders, sits quietly, allows you to mess with him. And also when you do something against him, gets very angry. Again, it's not referring to the ox, referring to the lion. And that's its koyach. Anybody that wants to mess with him, interfere with his life and his freedom. It's a total opposite of submission and surrender. Total antithesis. Two natures of animals that, like, you wouldn't believe that they both exist on the same planet. They're so opposite. It's hard to believe, rather, that they're from the same planet. That's by the ox. But in general, he says, it's a whole category of animals. We said earlier, domestic animals and the wild animals. Even though some of not all the domestic animals are all the wild beasts. You have like deer, gazelle, and all these that are, again, more of the behemoth nature, even though they're part of the chaya world. The nature of animals is this surrender. To accept the yoke, umasa, and a load. And to do all work with them. Oh, so that's only in behemoth, that you don't have in chaya. A deer doesn't do that. A zebra doesn't do that. A donkey does that. A horse does that. Farm animals. And even to withstand when you mess with them. As you know, you take a horse and you whip him. Or you take it. He gets a beating and is obedient. Like the horse. You put some type of a yoke on its neck, different than the yoke of the cow, which he said no animal would take that, of the ox, but pretty serious yoke. Put a muzzle on its mouth. And it pulls heavy loads. Willfully. And it takes a beating. And it does the will of the rider. And every way you pull it this way. You have a little kid, a little girl is riding on this massive beast. She pulls a little this way, it goes that way. She pulls him that way, it goes that way. What's going on here? The nature. Kidu as it knows. The nature of the beast. They don't surrender at all. They stand in rebellion. Lahazik. To damage, to pounce. And anybody that wants to civilize them. Like a wolf, a ari, and a lion, and a bear, and the like. However, there are animals that could accept some kind of a training where humans train them. Like a bear, b'meshach zman, takes a while to break it in, to do certain circus tricks and so on and so forth to behave. But this is never like this goes aligned with those that are anti-zoo and of course because of the cruelty to animals, and also it's not its nature. It's a wild animal, it belongs in the wild, doesn't belong in the zoo. For our entertainment, you want to take kids to the zoo, fine, but what's the animal's fault? The animal wants to roam, needs freedom, needs to be itself. It's so in a certain sense. Even when it does it, it's not really, really wants it. But the ox, you're not bothering the ox by doing this. No one is going to come. I mean, today's crazy world, they might start coming up with ideas that, that plow or that using a horse for this is interfering with the rights of the horse. You give it 10 years, I'm sure this will be on the agenda. But in truth, it's not. It doesn't belong. You can see it if you're studying the animal. The animal horses like to be ridden on and be part of that. It's kind of it suits them. Oh, now we come to the donkey. And how much more the donkey? It's a very submissive animal. Masa gedoyla, heavy. This is the moving company. It carries heavy boxes, loads, al atzmoi. And by him, it's b'sarei mamish. You can put it not only on the saddle, you can put it on its flesh itself. Kidu, as it is known, shekol masa shenoisei chamoyer, the pull. See, because the other animals, the what's his name, the horse, you tie whatever it is. I don't know what they call it, the thing, and when you connect the horse to its to the chariot. But over there, the load is not on the horse. The coachman sits behind, and the horse is pulling. But it's not on the animal. By the donkey, you actually put the load itself on the back of the donkey. Literally on it. Because its bones, its nature, it's built to be able to receive this heavy load. But it's not just its physical nature. It's not just its physical strength and physical build. It's also its temperament. The temperament of the donkey is very patient and very tolerant. Yosef are extremely tolerant, even more in some ways, menashar than an ox. Like the sages say, kishar la'oil, the phrase is like an ox to a yoke, and like a donkey, lamasa for a load. Like when it speaks about Shevet Yisachar in this week's parsha. Chamoyer gorem, he has bones like a donkey. That's in the bones of the donkey. He bent his shoulders down, lizbol, to tolerate. Shichmai mamish, literally his shoulder. Kechamoyer, like a donkey, that carries and tolerates the load al shichmai on its shoulder. If you say yesh ba'atzamai shichmai, it's literally penetrates into the bones of its, or rather not penetrates, it's embedded in the bones of its shoulders. Dafka teva hasavlanis, the nature of absorbing the pressure, and it's fine with it. Lizbar kol masakavet, to tolerate all heavy loading it up. Now, the other farm animals, in a sense, show even more submission. Like the sheep, va'izim, and the goats, that they're able, they don't put up much of a fight, even to withstand. Some might argue yes or no, but the fact that humans have been doing this all along, because that's the animal that will put up with it. You say, they're too weak to fight. Okay, but the fact that the animals there is lizbal gama shchita, to tolerate even the slaughter. Sadly, when you speak about the Holocaust and Jews, there's this thing where you say that they went like sheep to the slaughter, meaning the idea of that was to say they didn't put up a fight. Not getting into the question on that. Why didn't they put up a fight? Okay. Psychological complete breakdown that was done to them even before they knew what's happening. Whatever, that's not the point of tonight. But the fact that the comparison to the sheep is that sheep go almost like willfully, without any resistance. Okay, I got that. They're an animal, they can run, they can give you a hard time, back and forth, but they kind of like, sadly, it's painful, but on the assembly line. But it has to do with the nature of their soul. In the root from where their souls have been excavated, lamayla above. It's in the face of the ox, which is on the left side. Which on the left side, even though it's essentially gevura,
It's, however, noticed, what's present over there, I noticed more, is the water element, which water flows, calm, and it's not intense, mellow. It's the opposite of the face of the lion. It's the opposite of this passion. In intensification of flames of fire, ava of love, lamay above. Like it says, Aryeh Shag, the lion roars, as we spoke earlier. It's tolerated. What's my mission? It's more mission oriented. What's the job that needs to be done? A heavy job, an intense job. We're here to serve. That comes after the race. Which is this bittul, and the surrender, and acceptance, the yoke of heaven. They carry the heavy yoke. God expects enormous of them, and they're devoted to the job. Kishar la'oil lamata, like the ox accepting a yoke down here below. Like we know that mode exists also in davening. The different element of davening. We spoke earlier, one mode of davening is experiencing the rapture and the excitement and the fervent passion. There is another way of davening, which is a deep sense of submission. To accept upon oneself the yoke of heaven. Ba'ava, lovingly, v'ratzin. Not doing it like grudgingly, but doing it like the animals, domestic animals, that accept their love accept their load with full consent. Besur me'rav asei tov, and that's in davening well, where you make a very strong determination to turn away from bad and do good. Kol hayoim, all day long, avodah b'poil in the literal sense, mamish, literally, kishar la'oil b'vad, like an ox to a load or to a yoke. It's not that you're motivated by love, and that's why you want to do the mitzvahs. It's like bypassing the love. It's I'm here to serve because that's my identity, and I know that that's my being, and I'm surrendering myself. What is it that you need? I'm totally devoted. It's a different mode of serving God. Not because they feel love, with racing, with flames of fire, eslavas of excitement, cloud. Accepts upon himself the yoke of heaven. To tolerate in the literal sense, to nullify himself completely, stated in the book of Yetzirah, if your heart races, shuv, return, calm down. By way of analogy, it's like a person who doesn't have the energy to get close to a king. Ba'ava with love. Don't have that. Stands at a distance. With an enormous sense of obedience and surrender. Only to accept whatever the duty that the king tells them. Everything the king will decree, he's out there. That's called sticking to your mission, to where the king is sending you. Which becomes from the dominance of bittul, that energy in the soul, which is, if a person has that energy developed, it's in Yiddishkeit, it's the most important element, is this surrender. It's the opposite of this excitement and fervor where I want to feel closeness, I want to have a relationship with you, right? Because in the opposite, keeps at a distance. And this is the two angelic forces. One is racing upward, the other is returning. So again, all angels have both, but in the right side, it's predominantly the racing energy, and in the left side, it's predominantly the accepting energy. After the coming close and the elevation, with the intensification of love upward. These serpents, these burning angels racing, stand above him, meaning with this intense love to reach Shenikra Ratzai, that's called the racing. Instantly, it overtakes them. Emas Hashem, the dread of God. The Nesoigim, and they retract. The Shavim La'achar, and they fall back. Berichu Gadol, to a very great distance. Lamata below. Liasrak b'chines Kabbalas oil, only to say, yes, Master, what does God want of me now? I'm here to serve. Bavad merachik, from the distance. And even though in all these chayos and all these animals in the general celestial range, there is both these forces. In general, where there is two paths, there's two channels, l'yamin v'smoil, to the right and the left. The dominant factor on the right side is this, even though it's the opposite of what the right side is a flow downward, but the energy of the angels on that side is this racing excitement going up. And on the left side, which really essentially is the left, which is idea of fire, but the water element is more dominant over there. The bittul, is in the face of the ox on the left. In the Shlomo Melech and the Beis Hamikdash made a replica of the spiritual idea of the Shekhinah, and from the Merkava, the chariot carrying the throne and the Shekhinah. So he made this big water pool. Shekhinah is called a sea. The sea was called the Yam Shel Shlomo. Attached to the bottom were bronze or gold, I'm not sure, oxen, 12 oxen, representing the Merkava, which the three beasts, each one divides in, the four beasts, each one has three manifestations, so 4 times 3 is 12. But these oxen, Shubchenas Bittel Shubchenas HaMalchus, which the Yam Shel Shlomo itself is the element of Malchus. Malchus is called the sea. Like it said, and what do we find about these oxen? He wants to indicate how submissive they are. It says that the oxen were singing on the way. This is referring to not to these oxen, but to an event that happened earlier in history. It was when King David, when they were bringing the oxen, were bringing the Aron, the ark, back to the Mishkan after it was taken into captivity. They just put it on the oxen, on the carriage. The non-Jews were afraid to keep it. They had it and they didn't want it anymore for whatever reason. I think they put it on the thing, and the oxen went and carried it alone without anybody directing them all the way to the place. The wagon went on its own with the oxen carrying it, and they were singing when they were carrying. You heard them making noise because it was that willful accept. These oxen, because they came next to the ark of God, they were elevated to their source and sensed the energy of their source, which is a deep submission and a satisfaction in the submission, to the point that they're singing while they're pulling the thing. Shanasu Aron Elokim, they carried the supernal, the godly ark, b'pchinas bittul gadol, with an enormous surrender. Therefore, loy natu min haderech, they did not go off the path. Anna this way or that way. Stated in Zohar, that's the nature stemming from the face of the ox. But as according to the way it is seen in this division, that the lion is on the right side, which is the chesed, and the ox on the left side, which is the element of judgment. So, till now, we're talking about the crossover. The lion, which is essentially a kind entity, shows ferociousness and intensity, fire. The ox, which is essentially a gevura entity, displays this surrender and softness. But since it's essentially gevura, we know that the ox, don't mess with it. Because if for whatever reason the ox is gonna act in its essential oxishkeit, if you can say, it's extremely gevura, extremely dangerous. Okay, now sure, nakhon. That's why the ox essentially does have that, even though it's not its most exhibited feature. It has that ability really well. Lahamis Adam, to kill someone bekarnayim, with its horns, or machikim memeno gimalama, you have to stay a distance from it, at least 3 cubits. Because it does have extreme gevura. Nevertheless, even though it's such a gevura dege animal, which could be such a dangerous animal, yet it's the source for all blessings, because its main energy is drawing energy down, because, as we said it before, it gravitates to the opposite, and the opposite is noticeable in it. Kol shefa amshachas bo rak al yedei asher. All blessings come through the ox, because the ox brings us all the food. where the enormous tvua and grain comes in the power of the ox, because it carries the yoke. And that's why the ox hangs out domestically. The Aryeh and the lion, the cholachayos, and all the other beasts, Bamidbar, are in the desert, ubesada out in the fields. This was a parenthesis. So now we're going back, since the lion, who's on the right side, and the ox on the left side, should have been, as we said, naturally should have been that what? That the lion should have been more in the late nature of channeling energy down. Ubittel and surrender. Ubchenas shoyer, and the ox should have been what? Baratzai, more in the racing thing. Avala inyan hu, but the idea is, as we said earlier, he goes back to that metama now for the reason that we said earlier. Sharatzai v'shuv klulim zeh b'zeh. The rotzing and shuv are integrated one with the other, the racing and the retracting. K'moshe klulim eish mimayim, like fire is included from water, and mayim eish, and water is included from fire. That's why in the place of kindness, nikr Yosef b'chenes ha'gevura, what you notice, what is seen more, is the gevura shabai. But makam adin, and in the place of judgment, nikr v'nigli Yosef b'chenes ha'chesed shabai, you can see the kindness more, as we spoke earlier about Ashkenazim and Sfardim, and that, and the blackboard and the whiteboard, and all this idea where you notice the opposite stuff on the backdrop that is the opposite. And therefore, just like in the face of the lion that's on the right side. Nigla b'chenes gevura, that's where you see the passion, the gevura. Shebechesed of kindness. Gevura shebechesed, the gevura of chesed. Keteva eish, which is the nature of fire. Kach b'pnei shoyer, in the face of the ox. Nigla yoser, it is more apparent. B'chenes chesed shebegevura. The chesed of gevura is noticeable in the ox. Sheb'chenes hashuv, which is the retracting energy. V'habitl, and the nullification. Kamayim shenim shachem amakim gevoy ala namuch, like water that falls from a high place to a low place. Hapacha eish, the opposite of fire. Ukenal be'inya b'noi d'Avram begalusid Edom. It's the same idea that we said earlier, that the children of Avram Avinu, of entities of Chesed, are in the galus of Edom, because they can exhibit more the gevura necessary to harness the power of Esav. Ukenal. Now we have a third entity. In the chariot, we always talk about the lion and the ox. And what's with the eagle? There's a third one, which is the source of all birds. In the face of the eagle. That's more related to Yaakov. And therefore it's Teferes. So it's birds are an integration. Because it's the mediator, it's the medium. Bein Aryeh l'shor, between the lion and the ox. Al kenimtzu boy beizafech. That's why it possesses within itself the two opposites. The Aryeh v'shor, it has within it lion and the ox. And oifes adarsim kenesher, you have predatory birds that are like eagle, or the like. Kumoya Aryeh v'chayas, which has the nature of what? Of the lion and the beast. First, he's going to show that in general, there's two types of birds. In other words, over here you have two types of beings, and they're not in one category. There's chayos and there's behemoths. But over here you just have this one category called birds, and in them you have birds that are so different. You have the predatory birds, and then you also have birds that are very soft and very surrendering birds. Kiyonim, like doves, va'avzim, and geese, v'tarnagoyim, and chickens. This is because of their root above. Which is in the face of the eagle. And now he's showing that even in one bird, you can see opposite features. And in the eagle itself, naturally, it's very rahmani, at least in its family. It exhibits intense compassion. Nevertheless, a minute later, it will come and tear. So you have that blend. Who died is v'toid, if it rips and it tears. That's why there are also angels. Who comes from the face of, or they come from the element of eagle in the chariot. Like it says, a bird that flies. But didn't he say Michael is the lion? It's a question. That he flew to me. We brought the same pasuk earlier. With 2 wings it flies. Both. Similar to the lion and the ox, but this one is very integrated. It includes both of them. The yamin is small, right and left. Okay. And now we'll understand the shorish, the root of the shvatim. And now we'll understand the root of the tribes. That they're compared to beasts and to animals. Which is the lion and the ox in general, as we said earlier. As we said by Yehuda, Gur Aryeh, that Yehuda is compared to a lion. Binyamin and Benjamin, Binyamin is a devouring wolf. Yisachar and Yisachar Chamor Garim is a broad-boned donkey. Naftali, and Naftali is compared Ayala Shlucha to a swift gazelle. Now the Shvatim, they are exemplary, or they are a dugma, what would that be? A replica of the divine chariot. So, because the avos are higher than the chariot, they're in Atzilus, in the world of emanation. The Shvatim are in the world of Bria, in the world of the chariot. So since their souls, and they're deeper than the chariot is the angelic element of this level. They are the soul element of this level, but the soul element of that level. And that's why they have this animal features characterized by whichever side of the Merkava they stand for. Lepchinas Merkava Yoina, they are the Pnei Arya, the face of the lion, ki Yadu, as it is known, that we find 12 tribes. We were set up in the same way of a chariot. When the Mishkan and God was dwelling in the world, he had a chariot around him, and the chariot was the tribes themselves. 3 on one side, 3 on the other direction, and each were groups of tribes together, representing that. Being in Adegalim with these banners, Degel Machne Yehuda Mizracha, Yehuda was to the right side, was to Mizrach, to the east. Okay. Yehuda, Gur Aryeh, Yehuda is the lion, Binyamin, Zev Yitzray, Binyamin, which are both, actually they were in the same kingdom. You know, Yehuda, and we spoke about this on Monday, Binyamin and Yehuda were together in Jerusalem. That has a very intense energy. The predatory nature, both of them, one as a wolf and the other as a lion, but that chayas energy. They have that racing energy, that intense love, that passion, that fire. And then there's a lot of shvatim. Then there are shvatim that are compared to, as we said before, the animals that are more domestic animals. That means that what dominates them is not their passion. They're not such passionate Jews, but they're more compliant Jews, naturally. Kisher oil, which the ox that takes the yoke, that accepts and returns downward. Yisachar, just like Yisachar, Chamor Garim, broad-boned donkey. Roivetz bein ha-mishpesayim, that takes a nap between the cities, as Rashi says. Kabbalas oil ha-Torah accepts upon itself the yoke of Torah. Kamashakasav hekim oil. I think it says up in relating to King David that he takes upon himself, he established the yoke, but they take upon themselves the yoke of Torah. Hekem ule shel Torah b'chinas bittul. Enormous bittul in them. Ukeniskaliel, as we said earlier, rakli is b'chinas keli l'dvar Hashem. They're just, Torah scholars who accept upon themselves diligently to learn, and it's just a complete giving themselves over to be devoted to this continuous study so that God can come through them. They're carrying the load of godliness, channeling godliness to the world. They should be a vessel of Dvar Hashem, to the word of God. I will put my word in your mouth. Like a donkey to a load. Real learning of Torah, the way the ultimate scholars, it was the load of Torah. It's constant. And a pressure to learn and to finish and to complete and to start again and to review and non-stop. He puts his shoulder down to tolerate. V'yil lamas oived. And he becomes to like a taxed servant. The b'chinas avodas hakodesh the chachmei Allah. This holy supernal work of the supernal wisdom, sheneslabish b'Torah, that is enclosed in Torah, because if you so, they carried on their shoulder, because the Aron, which contained the Torah, needed to be carried on the shoulders. It was carried by the shoulders of the Levites, but in here he's using that for Yisachar, who's carrying the yoke of Torah, which means on their shoulders. Kechamor lamasa, like as we said, a donkey carries it on its own back. Shenoisa al atzmoisav, he carries on its bone. Ki mechonim lekabel kol masa, because they're prepared to receive every load. Keniskaliel. Sorry. V'zeh vayechi shchmei lispar. That's the meaning that he bends his shoulders to tolerate. All of this now. So these two features, the powers of Yehuda, and those similar to him, and the powers of Yisachar and those similar to him, which are two different modes, but all together they engage in one thing. The world, they make the world holy by stripping away the klipa and revealing sparks of holiness. It's a task for all the tribes and all the Jewish people, but the method is different. There are those who elevate sparks primarily by taking in food and so forth, eating or other possessions, and then integrating all this in their incredible passion for God, in their fiery love for God, in their intense spiritual experiences. That's lifting up sparks of holiness. That's the way the lion does it. So it goes out to hunt, referring to the Jew getting involved, doing business, taking of the sparks of the world, carrying that with him to the shul, and when he goes and he davens, he integrates these energies all into his intense yearning for Hashem and excitement and roaring towards godliness. Fiery praying, a prayer Jew. And then there is the Jew who studies Torah all day, not into spiritual experiences, but devoted and so meticulously to every aspect of observance and devoted to the study of it nonstop, halacha, and it's like, why? It's like, because he knows this, I'm a Jew and this is what I have to do all the time. It's not about necessarily always giving them the most satisfaction, but it's like no question, because as we said, and they're perfectly comfortable with it. Comfortable with not having a good time. They have a good time in learning, but sometimes it's just rigid learning and acceptance. Through studying of Torah, we channel godliness into the world, elevate a lot of sparks that way as well. By dictating what is right and what is correct, what is wrong, we separate the good from the bad, as we spoke. There's a biurei that happens through Torah. So, but it's everybody's part of the enterprise of making the world holy, which is the work of all the. We spoke about the fire, and I'm hearing this crackling sound here. Noise here, 1 second. It's my lamp. Turns out it's not the lamp. I don't know what it is. Maybe we lit a fire. In any case, so he says, the kol zeh, all of this, medaber b'pchenas habirurim. It's all speaking about this rectification, this selecting process, this purification process. The reish peiches of the 288 sparks. Shenikra teref, which are called 288, same gematria as the word teref, which teref means either food or prey. Not prey so much, but like when once you've gotten an animal gets a meal, that meal is called teref. She gets up at night, vatitin teref. This is the elevation of sparks amongst the 70 nations which spiritually originate in the 70 ministering angels of the world of Klippa, of the unholy, of Noga. Shenimshulu the teref, which that avoda of extracting sparks is the avoda of selecting prey. Malchus, that Malchus mevarer v'teref mehem. Malchus does the selection process and elevates these sparks through her children, each soul, which is coming down in these 12 animals. And that is accomplished through various different ways. Yehuda, what does it say about Yehuda? He wants to show how we enter into that the Jewish experience is really one of warriors, one fighting with an enemy and changing. And that's the idea. But Yehuda says, Yatcha, your hand will be in the neck of your enemy. It's a spiritual kind of a war. It's extracting the spark of holiness in the way Yehuda does it, which is that fiery passion towards Hashem. Kara Ravatz, Ka'aryeh lies down like a lion, Ukalavi, right? Ukamoya Aryeh Sheteref, Teref Eimatz, and like a lion that's devouring a beast, something, and no one can save him from it. What's the power? The power of Gevura from kindness, as we said earlier. Yisachar and Yisachar Chamoyer Gorim. He's the Jew who's the broad-boned donkey. Roivetz bein amish pesayim, that takes upon himself this heavy load. Gam came b'bchinas Biurei nitzutzim, is also engaged in this rectification of an elevation of sparks, but he does it in a different method. The oil Torah through the yoke of Torah, the b'chachmes beriru, because through Torah we know all the birurim, all the rectifications happen. Roivetz bein amish pesayim. This is the chachma going down all the way. That's why it's called rovetz. It crouches down on the floor. It lies down. And I guess bein amish pesayim means to differentiate. Lahavdil, levarer ulahavdil, to purify and to separate bein tamei letar, between what's impure and what is pure. Shenikra masa kaved. And this work of doing this is called a heavy load. Alkin roiva Sanhedrin. That's why most of the and not everybody can take upon themselves such an intense devotion to really know the Torah and to be able to be someone who offers psak halacha. You have to basically devote your entire existence to it, your entire life. It's a 24, not 6, 24/7, literally, no vacation. Definitely according to Rambam, if you want a Torah, every night and day. Okay, and therefore you have to be built that way. The tribe of Yisachar was from all the tribes primarily built to such obedient and devoted, constant study. Alkin Roiv HaSanhedrin, that's why most of the scholars that made up the high court, Hayam Yisachar, were from tribe of Yisachar. Mashakasim and Bnei Yisachar, the children of Yisachar, Yedei Bina, those who had understood knowledge. V'zeu vayar menucha kitoiv. I don't know what that means. He saw that resting is good. Why he brings that, I'm not sure. Because that seems to be the opposite. He finds himself a vacation. He goes for rest. I'm not sure. But in general, it's the opposite of the nature of the lion. Lilchoim bekoyach, to fight ferociously, litrev terev. Not into that. Getting into a battle, into a fight, pulling out a spark. And the Vayechi does it through the constant study of Torah. Lahalas anitzutzes, elevate sparks, b'pchinashuv de chachma, not through the passionate prayer, but through the devotion of Torah study. B'pchinas oil Torah, the yoke of Torah, k'niskaliyah. V'chein, and the same is also yehi done. Then there's another way of extracting sparks, unique way that involves much more cunning and slyness and trickery, and that is the tribe of Dan, which is compared to a snake. Nochash alei derech, compared like to a snake. Hanoisheich ikvesus, so it slithers up quietly and attacks a unsuspecting horse. It attacks what? The heels. Literally, the horse steps on it or steps close to it. It bites the horse literally by its heel, and the horse jumps. And because the horse jumped, the rider falls down, and that's how the rider is killed. And the rider falls. So this is all a symbolic, as Rashi says, to Shimshon Hagibor, who killed them, they thought they have him, right? And he shook the beams of the house and he killed all the Philistines as it. So it was like a way of like tricking your enemy and killing them unsuspectedly. Shugam came is bitter. This is also a form of rectification. Bir aradino. Spiritually, what is this referring to? It's another manner in which we do purification and the eradication of evil, the negative of noga, of the klippus, eliminating them. Shehen bechinas dechar v'nukva. The klippa is male and female. Ma uban the klippa, two forces. The male is called the power of Ma 45, as we learned many times. It's derived from one of God's names, which equal 45. And the female is associated with the name 52, which is also Hashem's name, in a different setting, which equals 52, which is the feminine side. So just like it exists in holiness, these two energies translate later into the unholy. So in Klippa there is a masculine force and a feminine force. And they are called V'nikra, and they are called Roich Veisus. They are called those who ride the horse. Ki yedua, as it is known, in other words, there are klippas that ride horses, and the dun is the type of holy Jew that's kind of going to strike unsuspectedly to the horses of the klippa, to the vehicles of the klippa, causing the riders, which are the spiritual klippas, to fall and to be broken. So what are the horses? Horses are, ki yedua, as it is known, shahasusu pchenas oisiyos. Horse, sus is called letters. Letters are called horses. We learned a lot of times about that in Chassidus, where horses are called letters, because just like a horse carries a person or carries mail or whatever it is from city to city, from place to place, throw to words are couriers. They carry ideas. So the klippas, both the male and the female klippas, both have horses, which are their letters of speech. V'ubchenes markava the klippa is the chariot of klippa. Maybe this is the media, because the media is just an agency of letters, of words, but it's being used, instrumented by both the masculine klippa and the female klippa. What exactly that is a different discussion, but these are forces and they're mainly just a force of words. Where it says a chariot left from Egypt, he's giving example of unholy chariots. The black horses from where? 85 of Zechariah, which is indicating some type of a dark force. But so how do you fight them? Sometimes you can't fight them directly. You need to lay an ambush, strike like a snake. In this case, it's going to be amazing that the snake is going to be a manifestation of holiness, that holiness can descend even to the level of snake and act as a striking snake. Strikes in this case, he's striking the words and throwing the energy that's riding on the horse by catching it by surprise and causing it to collapse. And the snake on slithering on the road, the snake of holiness, it's a descend into real constricted state, because snake is very constricted. Acharayim, the Shem Shakai, it's the back energy of the name of Shakai. Now, how Shem Shakai gets to Nachash, I don't know, even on a level of Acharayim, because we've discussed what Acharayim means. You take a letter, Shin, and then you make Shin Daled and Shin Daled Yud. But if you do that Gematria, you don't get Nachash. It's way more than Nachash. So I don't know how Acharayim, it's funny that I saw this once in a different book, and I was asking a rabbi who's very knowledgeable in all of this stuff, and he didn't give me an answer. So I don't know how Acharayim of Shakai gets you to snake. But whatever it is, it's some kind of a levarer or levar haram al mata lamayla that causes also a biurei by elevating things, not like Torah, which is dominating from above, but going in from the bottom and lifting it up. Similar to Yehuda lifting up things from the bottom through battle, active battle. This is also another way, but more of a sly way and a tricky way. It doesn't give much explanation of how exactly it works. It bites it stings or bites the the heels of the horses of the klipa. Umemela on its own, yiplo roichle achar, the rider falls. Now, how this will be interpreted, if this could be interpreted in destroying this force of unholy media that is now devastating the world, how exactly the snake comes, and I'm not sure. But maybe we need the Dunites to tell us, to teach us how to do this. It's that power, the Shevet Dun, that have this particular energy to do this. Again, I haven't thought this through, what this power really means. It's like when the horse and rider are cast into the sea. You strike the horse, and then those who are using it, it's again striking the media down. And those that are using it fall back, meaning these powerful forces that are behind this corrupted media, whatever. Which it's explained somewhere else regarding the snake of the rabbis. The sages, for instance, say that every Talmud Chacham that doesn't take vengeance like a snake is not a Talmud Chacham. So you see that there is an idea of snake of holiness. Usually snake is associated with the most unholy, but yet there is a concept of snake of holiness. The ketana is the chachma, these are the intense gevuros of snow. You know, when we learned about this, we learned an amazing mimer of 2-3 years ago, and we discussed the Parshas Vayechi a few weeks ago. Before Vayechi, Chayesara, was after Chayesara, told us, we spoke then about the incredible story of the snake they found on the Kotel, and that the snake was on the wall and it was taken off the wall. And right at that time, we were learning this awesome thing about the snake and the snake of the unholy, the snake of holiness, how it's considered moichin dekatnos and intolerance. When you don't tolerate and you become very condescending of other Jews, it's a snake. It's still in the realm of holy, but it's snake. And why that's not good and that evokes not negative. It was amazing talk that I forgot everything, but now that he's mentioning it, I'm remembering that we learned about it. And when this is unleashed, there's no healing from it. When there's narrow-mindedness and there's a certain condemnation that comes from narrow-mindedness, it can be a devastating, killing blow that can't be healed. That's how. So it's generally not a good thing. But I guess to be used on the klipa, sometimes it's necessary. Someone who's breaking the fence will be bit by a snake. That means a fence breaker, sometimes there's no other choice but to unleash the snake on him. And in the blessing of Moshe, Nemar, it says, Al dan gurarye. However, in the blessing of Moshe, he connects dun to a young lion. Yizanik min abashan, shubchines abirur shamamayla lamat, which is a birur that's coming from above. Ka'arye shetarif, like a lion that's, meaning, I don't know what it means, mamayla lamat. Didn't we say earlier Yehuda's birur is from the bottom? I'm not exactly sure. But maybe it means that it's a more direct, not a hidden, quiet ambush type of a shot. It's a direct assault, a front assault, as opposed to some kind of a scheming, hidden way. Because he's saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about, Yaakov Avinu is talking about each of the tribes as they go into their work. He's setting the pace of each tribe at their initiation point and how they're going to work. But then certain things change as we get to the conclusion of the work. Moshe Rabbeinu was talking about the final manifestation of all the tribes in the end of days. And that's why certain tribes he changes from the way Yaakov, because in the end it's not always going to be consistent with the way it was in the beginning. Why, what, and when, I'm not exactly sure. Probably very deep secrets to this. When we're going to gather then together, Yachad, which is referring to the unification of all the Jewish people under Mashiach. That's the end of days. Don't know what he wants with that. Zvulun is by the lives by the seashore. It puts out fish nets, I think. It's all it's all the various different spiritual dynamics of the different methods in which we break the klipa and extract the sparks. Hashayach lechelka shel Zvulun, that which is connected to the business merchants, to the world of Zvulun. V'chein God gedud, God goes out in war. Hu yagid ma'asher shmeina lachmai, from Asher there is a fatty bread. If you should tovel b'shem and ragloi, because he dips his feet into oil. Similar to Yisachar, he's bringing chachma, shemen is chachma, but he brings it all the way down to the feet, meaning he allows the lights of chachma to go very, very low, similar to the Hanukkah candle, that we take the oil and we put it outside to the street. So the lights of chachma, like we learned actually the Maimer last week, when we learned your mezuzahs on the right side and menorahs on the left side, and it extends far, far outside to the outside of the house. And we learned over there, that's the energy of Chachma, Chachma's Bachutz, that Chachma goes all the way out. That's Asher. They go far, far out. Naftali is compared to the Gazelle. Again, he doesn't give an elaborate discussion on all of them. He just gives very brief, some little entity. Gam came all the power to do a birur, that goes down very far. That's what's called shalucha. It's sent to a distant place. Moshe Bezoyer stated in Zoyer. Binyamin Zev Yitroy. Binyamin is the wolf. Baboiker Yochel Ad, who's eating in the morning. That's the rectifications that happened through the altar. The altar wasn't the chelik of Binyamin. The altar was in literally the territory of Binyamin, and that's where all the animals were consumed. A whole different method of elevating sparks. B'chvasim ve'elim, in sheep and rams. This is what a wolf does. He goes out hunting sheep and ram. Agabe mezbeach on the altar. Was the altar was in the lot of Binyamin. Like a wolf that grabs and tears the sheep. And all of their job together, cohesive work or multi-dimensional type of work, it's all to complete the ultimate task of these rectification, the Reish Peiches of the 288 sparks. This one does its birur in this manner, and this one does its birur, its rectification in this manner. Different modes for different strokes, that's what it says. Kol echad lefi sharsha, everybody according to their nature of their soul. So when you see Jews that are not being Jewish the way you exactly do it yourself, understand there's different modes. As long as it's a pathway of Torah. If it's not a path of Torah, it's a different story. People make up their own things. But if it's a path of Torah, it might not be your path. But there's other ways, and it's not consistent with you. And you shouldn't do that, because it doesn't belong. It's not consistent with the energy of your soul. But the respect has to be there, because understanding that the tribes are different tribes. As they are all set up consistently with their source above in Atzilus, which are the 12 different boundaries of these diagonal boundaries, the Vav Ksavas, the Zeirampin of the 6 corners of the Zeirampin, the 6 directions of the Kamashkasar, Shesham, the Shvatim, Shifteka, Uklulasam, and in general, who are bitter with Ratzah Veshuv. In general, it's this bitter in both in a manner of Ratzah and Shuv, as we spoke earlier, of Behemais and Chayas. But there's so many different in detail that becomes so specialized. Oifanim shine different ways. Zemi zeh one from the other. Keniskas we say Elvi in Ratzah Veshuv the Arye Veshor the Dailamev. Yosef is going to explain. However, is on a whole different level. Let's learn a tiny little passage, and next week we're going to start by the words Ubir Advarim, an explanation of the matter. So we're just going to learn one more little bit. All these bir of the Shvatim, it's all to extract and bring the world from a defiant state, from a state of disconnect from God, which is what the Klippa wants. Break the Klippa, reveal the potential of good that's in everything, surrender it to holiness. And that is where that which is created to be a something surrenders itself to the power that's making it. That's called Bittul Hayesh. La'ayin, to nullify things from its egotistical selfhood to a state of surrender. Mebchinas Hapirud, from fragmentation and separation, to the state of unity. Like we said before, by Yehuda, his hand is in the neck of his enemy. To subdue the other side. It will never turn away the ruling stick, like we discussed on Tuesday night class. And to him will gather nations. He will ultimately accomplish that all nations, what was once klipa, will surrender to God. It's taking the nations that are in a state of separation. Therefore they're called branches that are branching off in separate directions, going their own separate way, which means disconnecting from God. To bring them all, and to unify them, like we're seeing that happening in the world already, with Bahrain and Morocco and the Emirates, taking all these nations that till now were so shunning Israel and so on and so forth, and they're beginning to come along. It's beginning to wrap up. Mashiach is beginning to gather all the nations and unify. The Kedusha Elokus, to connect them all to the unity of the holiness of godliness. So Yehuda does this. But it's true, every tribe, and you see that the main emphasis that it mentions in all the blessings of Yaakov, it's all about confronting that which is the opposite and bringing it into holiness, because that's the whole work. Likolol ba'ayin, to bring what is something, what is not in a state of bittul, to a state of bittul. Shenikra biurei, that's the refinement. Kamoi b'Yisachar roivitz bein hamishpasayim canal. He crouches and lies down between the mishpasayim. Where what does he do? He separates good from bad through his Torah study. What is good and what is not good, and that's this work of bringing what is good means what is ready to go into the surrender to God and what is not. Moshe also talks very much about this conflict. The Torah of Zoya Afkad Koid, he cuts off the arm and the head in one swipe. So you see, it's like this fight against the klipa, the transformation. Ubezvulin Amar, and by Zvulin he says, Amim Har Yikro, that he brings the nations to, because he lives by the port and people do business with him, he ultimately brings them all to the mountain. Sham Yizbachu. Over there they will sacrifices to God. And says they're bringing their animals, they're bringing their wealth to the Beis HaMikdash. And it says more, Kishefa Yamim Yinaku. They will nurse the flow of this all the seas. That means all the imports and exports will all come to Israel. It will all be integrated into holiness. Particularly, it's referring to the special fish called chilazoin that gives out this blue dye that blinds the klippas spiritually. And that's why Yaakov. So this general idea that it's the concept of the conflict with the other side and the transformation. This is what Yaakov says. Gather before he introduces the blessings. Gather, and I will tell you what's going to happen to you in the end of days. What's the end of days? The end of days is when we're going to complete this task of all rectifying all the world, all the 70 nations. These are the rectifications of the 70 nations. That we've been busy doing all the long history of the Jewish people. First, all the time that the Jewish people were in the land of Israel, we were also rectifying. Because, as we said earlier, the nations came and we were like a magnet pulling the sparks. But then we had to go into the negative, into the unholy territory. And all the time of the diaspora, of the exile, until the days of Mashiach, as it is known, which is called Achras Hayamim. That's our work. By Yosef, Yaakov inyan Biurei. Yaakov does not mention any of this conflict of Biurei. Elo Ama ben Poires Yosef. Yosef is a son of charm. Oisi is Toifer u'Poiser. Shukoyach Biurei levarer. It's a power to do Biurei, but it's not active Biurim. It's not active rectification. Because levarer oisi is bisman agolas. He's a dream interpreter. So there is, in the time of exile, when we're dreaming, there's all these words, all these combinations of letters, and Yosef is the power to sort it out. Shenikra cholim, exile, lifter oisei, to give us the pitron, to give us the the interpretation of the dream. Power of Yosef to interpret the dream. The letters of Golus. Golus is such a confusion. You have to make sense of what's happening. Shubchin is bitter base, but that's already a second bitter. Levada desashakavar nivrar. We're going to see mainly this next week. Yosef's ability is to take what is already elevated. That's whatever we brought back, all the letters we bring from Golus, all the sparks, and he reprocesses them to really organize them, to really make them fit for total assimilation into the divine. Whatever came from the something to the ayin at the time of Golus, we're asleep, it's an exile, so it's a dream. And Yosef is that power to take it to the next step. He's called the skull, the head, Nazir Echav, separated from his brothers. That we're going to learn next week. What is the superior quality of Yosef over the brothers, that they have their hands dirty in the conflict, and Yosef is supposed to elevate what they elevated already. We'll see that Be'ezus Hashem next week's class. Biurei Advarim will start from here. Exciting. This is good stuff. Everyone should have a good Shabbos, and I am exhausted.